Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we are live downtown on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Thank you for joining us, wherever you're joining us from this morning. The show is on until 8:37 AM, your morning show on CBC. Let's say good morning to our small and mighty team. Mr. Corey Funk is here this morning, directing the show and covering on the air the commute, so we'll hear from him. Good morning, Corey. Good morning to Mr. Brad Lillies, who's giving you hello on YouTube. Brad is our YouTube producer. And good morning to Mr. Abby Adiemi, who's behind our controls this morning. Abby covers the weather on the program. We will today be looking at another sunny day, speaking of which, and a high of 21 in Winnipeg. Nice and clear tonight as well for the whiteout party downtown. In Brandon, sunny today and a little bit windy, wind south 20 to 40. Your high will be 20 degrees. And up in Thompson, sunshine as well. Really windy though, winds south 30 to 50. We know what that feels like down south here. It's been so gusty the last few days. But in Thompson, your daytime high today is 15. Let's find out what's making Wednesday morning headlines in Manitoba. And for that, we turn to Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the aunt of a woman whose remains are believed to be in a Winnipeg landfill is hopeful after a meeting with the province yesterday. Sue Caribou wants the Brady Road landfill to be searched for her niece, Tanya Nepanak. She was last seen nearly 14 years ago, and police believe her body was put in a garbage bin. Now, the province is planning to look for the remains of Ashley Shingoose in that same landfill, so we'll hear more about that. As well, a patient is suing a Winnipeg chiropractor, claiming he injured her during treatment and she suffered stroke as a result. We'll hear about the lawsuit in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Just want to mention also, Abby was just having a look, obviously, at the weather, because that's what he's going to be on the air with. He's just mentioning the local smoke that could be affecting the community of Dauphin, the city of Dauphin. So take care if you're up that way. In the first hour of Information Radio this morning, we'll get some analysis of that meeting between Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump. Also, this morning on our medical column, we're going to hear why rice, you might have heard that acronym, to fix ankle sprains, knee strains, the reaction to those things might not be what you want to do anymore. So we're going to hear more about that from Dr. Raj Bhardwaj. So stay tuned for that. But of course, we have very serious news developing between India and Pakistan. And so let's turn to World Report now for the latest.
On Cue with Tom Power.
If you know people who have had to step away from their religion, you know it's very hard. The Canadian songwriter Lights went through something like that and worried that when she stepped away, she'd lose her ability to write songs at all. She'll be here to tell you why she thinks it actually led to her best work.
You start questioning your autonomy. You want to make decisions for yourself.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. This is a moment the world has been bracing for ever since the attack on India-administered Kashmir last month. Longtime rivals India and Pakistan are on a warlike footing. India conducted multiple missile strikes yesterday on Pakistan's territory, and Pakistan has authorized its Air Force to respond. In total this morning, 31 people have already been reported dead. The United Nations, China, Russia, France, and Britain are all calling for restraint. Ishan Garg has the latest from New Delhi.
Indian missiles hit 9 locations in Pakistani territory. 5 of them in Pakistan-administered Kashmir and 4 in mainland Pakistan. Indian officials say all of the targets were terrorist hideouts. And in what's being called India's biggest counter-terrorism offensive, officials say they have responded to the Pahalgam attack that killed at least 26 people 2 weeks ago. An attack India says was backed by Islamabad.
India exercised its right to respond and preempt, as well as deter more such cross-border attacks.
That's India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri saying India ensured no civilian or military properties were hit in the strikes on Pakistani territory overnight.
Measured, non-escalatory, proportionate, and responsible. They focused on dismantling the terrorist infrastructure and disabling terrorists likely to be sent across to India.
But Pakistan is contradicting this claim, saying some civilians were killed and vowing to respond to what it calls an act of war. The situation on the two nuclear rivals' borders is already tense. Both sides are exchanging gunfire and firing projectiles. Asian and French airlines are diverting and in some cases cancelling flights to avoid the region's airspace. And despite international calls for restraint, analysts believe the situation could turn more volatile in the near future. Ishan Garg for CBC News, New Delhi.
The doors of the Sistine Chapel will lock behind 133 cardinals this morning. Their mission is to choose the next pope following the death of Pope Francis last month. But the task is more difficult during this conclave. Megan Williams has the story from the Vatican.
No phones or cell phone reception or contact with the outside world. Just ballots, prayer, and the pressure of history. This conclave is unlike any before. With 133 cardinal electors, men only and under 80, it's the biggest in history. It's also the most geographically diverse. The late Pope Francis wanted a church from what he called the peripheries. And those he made cardinals reflect that desire. They come from distant places that never before had a vote. Brunei, South Sudan, Mongolia. Before this week, many had never even met, says Vatican observer Massimo Fagioli.
Francis was not inclined to have many consistories of cardinals. So they are largely strangers, especially those who come from the peripheries. So it's a highly unpredictable conclave.
Italy's top Vatican diplomat, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, is considered a frontrunner, with a position that gives him global visibility. So is Cardinal Luis Tagle of the Philippines, charismatic, multilingual, and often seen as the Asian Francis. But observers warn, with cardinals divided, distant, and unfamiliar, any outcome is possible. Megan Williams, CBC News, the Vatican.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has to report back to Canada's premiers today. He promised to update them on the details of his meeting yesterday with U.S. President Donald Trump. The public tone between the two leaders was friendly, but Trump signaled he would not be convinced to lift tariffs. Janice McGregor is here from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, how much is there really to update the premiers on this morning?
Marcia, when the cameras are rolling, Donald Trump always wants to look tough and in charge. So no surprise to see him unwilling to concede or walk anything back in the Oval Office yesterday. When progress happens for Canada, it's often after the fact, more quietly, on paper, and with the justification that it's good for Americans, not because a foreign government wanted it. Reporter after reporter yesterday asked the Prime Minister to identify tangible progress coming out of this meeting. But Mark Carney emphasized process.
You don't expect to have specific progress as things move along, even when you're making progress. That's why it's a global negotiation.
The victory yesterday may have been the avoidance of humiliation. Canada's delegation emerged with their sovereignty and their dignity intact. In this week of World War II anniversaries, Mark Carney reached for a Winston Churchill quote, saying, "This trip to Washington signifies the end of the beginning of this battle."
But on the domestic front, Janice, how peaceful are relations between premiers?
Premier Danielle Smith has focused her attention over the last week on a fresh round of demands for the federal government, acknowledging the frustration in her province over the election result and amplifying the minority of Albertans that want to channel that into a referendum on separation. That risks undermining the work of other premiers like Ontario's Doug Ford, who's been lobbying flat out for Team Canada.
This is a time to unite the country. Not people saying, oh, I'm leaving the country, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
I don't tell him how he should run his province, and I would hope that he doesn't tell me how I should run mine.
Since the election, Carney's been asking premiers to identify their top priorities to strengthen Canada's economy, particularly infrastructure projects, which in the energy sector can be divisive. We'll see if the Prime Minister can do that while keeping a lid on these tensions.
All right. Thank you so much, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Former U.S. President Joe Biden says he believes there is a greater threat now to democracy than at any time since the Second World War. In his first interview since leaving the White House, Biden told the BBC the Trump administration needs to stop criticizing their European allies for not doing enough to support NATO.
Imagine there being no NATO. Do you think Putin would have stopped at Ukraine? I don't understand how they fail to understand that there's strength in alliances. There's benefits. The cost there, it saves us money overall.
Biden was also asked about Donald Trump's treatment of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House back in February. Biden says the interaction was beneath America and what it stands for. In the early hours of the morning, Russian airstrikes hit residential buildings in Kyiv. Ukrainian officials say 2 people were killed. A witness describes hearing the sound of the drone, then an explosion. He says his neighbor called to tell him his apartment entrance was on fire. Moscow says it shot down a counterattack on the capital, and the debris set some apartments on fire. Last month, CBC News brought you the story of a family from El Salvador. They were jailed at a U.S. port of entry twice after trying to enter Canada. But a challenge at the Federal Court of Canada has allowed some of them to enter this country and make an asylum claim. The CBC's Jorge Barrera has been following their journey.
Araceli Serrano says she feels hope. This time, Canada will let her in with her daughters Madeline, 14, and Itziana, 4. In March, Araceli and her husband fled to Canada to escape the immigration crackdown in the U.S. Canadian border officials rejected documents Araceli said proved she had 2 brothers living in Canada, key to making an asylum claim. Canada sent the family back twice to the U.S., where they were held for 2 weeks in a Niagara Falls, New York port of entry holding cell. No windows, no breath of fresh air.
I think finally the government has recognized that they did the wrong thing.
Araceli's lawyer, Heather Neufeld, says Canada agreed to let the family in after she filed a court challenge. We're getting close to Canada, Araceli tells her daughters, as they once more walk across the Rainbow Bridge that spans the Niagara River and the border.
Extremely relieved. It was super stressful.
After several hours, Neufeld calls from inside the Canadian Customs building. Araceli can stay. Canadian border officials released Araceli and her daughters into the arms of her waiting brothers. We're here, says Araceli. Neufeld says they're now working on getting Araceli's husband Marcos into Canada. He remains in a U.S. immigration detention center, facing deportation back to El Salvador. Jorge Barrera, CBC News, Niagara Falls, Ontario.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello there, Winnipeg. Another sunny day on the way. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us to start your day on Information Radio. This is the morning show on CBC 89.3 FM. Also at 990 AM on YouTube, where we just saw a beautiful shot of the sky out there. This hour on the program, quite a story for Paralympian Leanne Taylor. She says parasport is much more than medals. So the elite para-athlete from Manitoba is going to share some stories from her upcoming podcast called More Than Medals in a feature interview she did with guest host Margot Watt yesterday. So we're going to hear a little bit of that this morning to start the show. Also this morning, analysis of the Prime Minister and U.S. President's meeting. So we're going to have a full interview about that. You just heard quite a lot on World Report, but we'll build on it. And then at 10 to 7 this morning, on our regular medical column, when you get injured, we're heading into the season of getting out there and doing all the things again. What do you do when you do get a minor injury? Well, apparently, you don't rest, ice, compress, and elevate anymore. There is new medical advice about what you should do. So Dr. Bardwaj is going to be in to tell us more about that. Let's get to other headlines and news. That's with Heather Wells right now, and let's go to her live in our news center. Good morning.
Well, some people in Winkler are worried about the rising number of measles cases there. 10 cases have been confirmed in the Southern Health Region since February. Recent exposure locations include the Winkler Superstore and Boundary Trails Health Center. As of 2023, Southern Health had Manitoba's lowest rate of measles immunizations for children at the age of 7. So we're going to hear from the medical officer of health in that region coming up. As well, Manitoba has one less wooden grain elevator on the prairie landscape. A fire early yesterday morning destroyed the elevator in Waskada. That elevator, built back in 1961, it was still being used for grain storage. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Waskada, if you've never been there, just a tiny little place. It has the smallest, its claim to fame at least years ago was the smallest graduating class in Manitoba. I remember visiting for a series we did on grad classes around, in June.
How interesting.
So,
yeah, Southwest Manitoba, yeah.
So everyone's going to be talking about that today, obviously, that the loss of that elevator.
Yeah.
Sad.
And apparently, emotional impact that it has.
Yeah. Well, we'll hear more in your news, of course, as you said, Heather.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's bring it back here to Winnipeg and find out what's going to happen in the weather forecast with Abby.
Good morning. Cold and chilly start, though. It gets sunny and it warms up across the province today. We're going to see light breezy conditions from the south, and then that local smoke is still hanging over the south central region from Dauphin into Flin Flon, the and surrounding areas. So you need to take care as you get out and about today. In Winnipeg at this time, the sun is already out, clear outside, 2 degrees. We should get to a high of 21 by the afternoon period. And in most of the southern regions, we're seeing temperatures around 2 degrees at this time.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Abby Adiyemi with our weather. We'll talk to him through the morning, as will we with Corey Funk. Hi.
Hello. Yeah, no major issues on the commute so far. But if you're out there, you see something, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's begin the show this morning with a bit of Leanne Taylor's story. At the age of 25, she became paralyzed from the waist down after a bicycle accident. 6 years later, she would become the first Canadian woman to win a para-triathlon at the 2024 Summer Games in Paris. It took grit, it took determination, but Leanne doesn't take full credit. Her new podcast is out right now. It's called More Than Medals. It highlights the para-athletes that inspired and encouraged her all along the way. Here's a bit of a snip.
I love hearing other people talk about spinal cord injury recovery and just disability in this way that's a little bit more positive and light.
I learned how to climb trees better than they did, and I learned how to throw rocks better than they did. And
for context, so that people don't just think you're a menace, can you tell us about your disability?
Leanne Taylor speaking about her new podcast, More Than Medals, or spoke about it rather yesterday with the CBC's Margot Watt.
So you're an elite athlete, public speaker, mum to be.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You have a regular day job. So you thought, I'm not quite busy enough. Maybe I should do a podcast.
Yeah, I don't know if I thought that aspect of it through. It definitely meant being a little bit more busy, but I think these stories just so deserve to be told that we felt really compelled to share them.
So tell me about that. What was the motivation? Why did you want to do this?
When I was injured, I had access to a lot of different people in the community who came in to me when I was in the hospital even and talked to me about parasport and what my life might look like. And now I serve as a peer mentor for Spinal Cord Injury Manitoba. And when people ask me who are newly injured, have new spinal cord injuries, what was helpful to you? Like what really helped you to feel better and to manage a lot of the mental health aspects? It was getting involved in the disabled community. And so because I got so much from the disabled community in terms of support and friendship and learning a lot of physical things and mental things and all these strategies, I really wanted to bring that to other people. And so to kind of answer that question, like what helped me in my spinal cord injury recovery, it's these people who are interviewed on the podcast who also happen to be, many of them, very successful Paralympians and medalists and world champions.
So what will we hear on the podcast?
We go through each episode sharing a story of a different athlete, and all of the athletes were athletes that were in Paris 2024. And the point of calling the podcast More Than Medals is that the athletes have so much more to offer than just their success in sport, which is phenomenal. phenomenal in and of itself, but the athletes talk about some of the things that they went through to get there. So some of them are cancer survivors, some of them were born with their disabilities, some of them acquired their disabilities or had more severe disabilities as their disabilities became more severe as they grew up. And so hearing those stories and hearing how they adapted to so much change and so many difficult situations, I think really connects with anybody who is trying to overcome something challenging.
And are these stories that we just don't really hear about often enough?
I think they're the things that people don't say, or they're the questions that people are a little bit uncomfortable to ask of the disabled community. You very often get inspiring stories, but you don't get as often the funny aspects or these details of what a person's life is actually like. So Jess, one of the blind athletes, talks about what it's like growing up being visually impaired. And there was a clip of that in the beginning where she talks about learning how to climb trees and learning how to do all these things that you just don't think of as, a little blind kid is doing these things. But she talks about it with this humor and this openness, which I think is so beautiful and so unique.
And that lighter tone, how important is that, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's what's really exciting. I think when these stories are told, they're often told as tragedies. But if you meet these people, they do not think that they have tragic lives whatsoever. They think that they have had something difficult happen to them, and they're very honest about how difficult those times were. But now they are joyful and fun and just like everybody else. And so I think it's a good way to break down some of those barriers between the disabled and able-bodied community that don't really need to exist.
Now, you mentioned Jess. Who are some of the other athletes we meet on your podcast?
Yeah, we have Kendall Gretsch on there, whose episode is out now. She's one of my U.S. competitors, and also Austin Smeek, Greg Stewart. There is some of my competitors are going to be doing episodes, some of my teammates are going to be doing episodes in the future, which we're really excited to hear. So there's a good lineup. Howie Sanborn, who's also a veteran, who's an interesting person, and Haley Dans, also incredible names from the parasport world, who, if you don't know, it is pretty exciting to get to know.
So you're calling up your competitors and saying, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? What was their reaction?
Yeah, I was really nervous to ask anybody to be on it, honestly, because, this is one of those things, like, no one asked for this. I just decided that I really wanted to share these stories. But I've been really lucky in that the parasport world is incredibly supportive, and these people were genuinely the reason that I was able to qualify for Paris in a lot of different ways. And so calling them and saying, like, I did this because of you, and I would love for your stories to inspire the next generation of athletes in the way they inspired me. I think people felt that they wanted that so badly, wanted to inspire that next generation. And so no one said no, which I was absolutely amazed by. Yeah. I think that athletes are very honest and open in the podcast, which is what I love about it so much.
So you thought maybe people would say, I don't know if I want to get that personal.
Yeah, I think I wasn't sure if people would be as enthusiastic about it. Especially, I asked my Australian competitor, Lauren Parker, who has quite a big profile, and I just thought, she's probably used to getting paid for these things and doing them for bigger organizations. And so, yeah, I was surprised in that aspect. And then I think that people were so forthcoming in a lot of ways because they don't get asked these questions by someone from the disabled community very often. And when they do, I think I can sort of ask questions that get to the core of what we're trying to talk about, which is letting people know that disabled people are a lot more like everybody else than they think. And we have these backgrounds and these stories, but we're also just people, just athletes, just moms in some cases, just employees. So I think it has a nice perspective in that way.
I know years ago when I worked in private radio, I was program director of a radio station, and we were building a new radio station. So signing on a brand new thing, brand new station, new music, everything. And I was pregnant at the time. And all of the DJs and my staff said, it's like you're having another baby, because it was my baby. And I'm wondering what this, other baby for you has been like, launching and bringing to life.
Yeah, I was honestly so nervous to release it. And I think in the same way, anytime you do anything, which I think you can relate to, that you put so much heart and soul into, you feel so exposed. Yes. And I was nervous to do that. But what really kept me kind of pushing it forward is that these stories deserve to be told.
So what do you think a podcast like this would have meant to you when you were just starting off in sport?
When I was injured, when I was in the hospital, people came to me and kind of said, maybe you could go to the Paralympics. And it was kind of one of those things people say to sort of make you feel better. And I thought that was nice.
Yeah.
And so then I eventually kind of looked it up and was like, what sports are there? Is this really something I could do? And then I found some of the athletes who compete in my sport, which is paratriathlon. And I remember stalking them on Instagram and trying to figure out how are these girls doing this? What is this? How are wheelchair users doing triathlons? And so I think this podcast kind of is us as the athletes reaching out to those newly disabled people and trying to say, instead of having to stalk us on Instagram and feel weird about it, we're reaching out to them saying yeah, this is the life you can have and it can be beautiful and fulfilling with or without a disability.
So now there's a career in broadcasting ahead of you, right?
That would be amazing.
I can hear it. I can hear you now. Where can people hear your podcast?
It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you want to see what these athletes look like, you can watch it on YouTube as well. So basically anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find it.
We'll find you.
That is CBC's Margot Watt speaking with Leanne Taylor, a Paralympic bronze medalist and host of her new podcast, More Than Medals.
The United States has been ripped off.
The stories that matter.
Canada will be responding
as they happen.
We must put Canada first.
At home and around the world.
We don't need the products that they have.
And what they mean to you. For news you can trust.
We're coming to you live.
Stay with CBC News.
So you heard Donald Trump there. You got to wonder if we're going to have to change some of those clips out after yesterday's meeting, right? So let's go to yesterday's meeting for analysis next in the show. 6:23 a.m. Prime Minister Mark Carney, U.S. President Donald Trump meeting in front of cameras and reporters yesterday in the Oval Office, first time face-to-face. Now, Trump did appear somewhat respectful of Prime Minister Carney. The president reiterated, though, that the U.S. Does not need anything from Canada. Marco Vellotti is with us for some analysis. He's editor-in-chief of iPolitics. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
So we've had a lot of analysis of this because this is, since yesterday afternoon. So I kind of want to push us forward to the 51st state moment. How well do you think he handled that?
I think it was very tactful. I think, we all anticipated that it was going to be a flashpoint between these two leaders. I don't think any of us anticipated Donald Trump was going to have some overnight conversion and suddenly he's going to drop this issue. But I will say the way he framed it was a bit different. He talked about how, it was less of a demand and more of an offer, saying, hey, I will more than comfortable dropping this issue. It takes two to tango. But he did raise it. And I think it was important for Mark Carney to respond decisively, which he did, saying that, I spoke to the bosses of Canada and they basically have shut this down. There's no way we're going to be the 51st state. And then he immediately pivoted to a conversation where he thought there was some potential for negotiation and even acknowledged that, hey, the U.S. under Donald Trump woke up Canada for its need to increase defense spending. So it was a very tactful way to acknowledge what Donald Trump said, push back at it, and then immediately shift the conversation. And it didn't evolve into a Zelensky-style, shouting fit. So I guess that was a positive performance from Mark Carney.
Someone said to watch this on mute and just watch Carney's face through all of it. And I thought that's interesting because he was really picking his moments for reaction in terms of verbally. But he was reacting, right? But I think Canadians were leaning in you have to say something to that. And I think in many moments, he picked his moments, as you said, and used a lot of tact. Now, I will point to the fact, though, that Trump obviously said there wasn't anything that Carney could say to convince him to lift tariffs. And then he did reiterate this, we don't need anything from Canada. What does this mean for negotiations moving forward to you?
Yeah, how do you negotiate with someone who has basically, again, suggested that there's no daylight there, that they're not going to drop tariffs? He was asked point blank, what can Carney do to convince you to drop tariffs? And the response was nothing. So, how do you have a negotiation with someone like that? So I think it's tough to kind of see any daylight. I guess if you take Donald Trump at face value, he still sees Canada as a partner. He still sees Canada as a friend. There was that, sense of mutual, I guess, respect on both sides. And Mark Carney is pointing to the fact that more talks have been kind of agreed to, the fact that both sides will be talking to each other and they will meet at the G7 summit in Kananaskis next month. But yeah, I got to circle back to this point. Donald Trump was so resolute and decisive, and it could all just be a negotiating ploy. But if you take him at face value, there's really nothing to negotiate right now.
Given that, obviously, the Prime Minister would disagree with you, though, Marco, because, he's going to be Donald Trump's going to be welcomed into the country for talks. But as you said, we don't know where he's really at the best of times. What did he accomplish then, do you think, yesterday, the Prime Minister?
That's a good point. The Prime Minister is going to say the fact that we're talking is an accomplishment. The fact that, We have more talks scheduled. The fact that Donald Trump's going to come to this country next month, these are all positive developments. I don't really know if I agree with that. I think this meeting can't be framed, I think, as a success or not a success, depending on breakthroughs. I think it's kind of the perfunctory thing you do as a Prime Minister of Canada. You basically just won an election. You have to go to Washington. You have to see, the leader of our only land neighbor, right? It's something you have to do as Prime Minister. But I don't know if there's anything else you can take away from that meeting other than they met. There seems to be a good rapport between the two, and the story. Donald Trump was clear and decisive, nothing to talk about, nothing to negotiate on. I don't know how you can make anything bigger out of what happened yesterday other than it seems like the two leaders seem to get along.
In terms of how they got along versus Trudeau, what did you make of all the insults of Trudeau? And then it was he didn't name Chrystia Freeland, but he was clearly talking about her. I actually thought the Prime Minister was going to say something in that moment, but it was one of those I was watching his body language. He didn't lean into it. But what did you make of all the really the insults coming from the U.S. president to former leaders?
Yeah, I guess it kind of explains that maybe him and Mark Carney get along well, because there was none of that kind of tension. But the fact that once again he's bringing up Justin Trudeau, taking pot shots at Chrystia Freeland, it just suggests, I think, that this is someone who's going to talk about what they want to talk about. How do you kind of rein in that conversation so we don't go into a diatribe about past grievances with past leaders? I think Mark Carney kind of had to pick his battles or pick his fights pretty strategically yesterday. But again, it just shows that this is who we're dealing with in Donald Trump. It's unpredictable. You have to be careful and strategic with how you approach it. And I don't know. Do you look at this as a positive development, saying, wow, he clearly seems to like Mark Carney because he's not recycling some of these criticisms or insults they have for Justin Trudeau? I guess, but at the same time, Donald Trump's so tough to read.
Marco, thanks for this morning. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's Marco Volati, the editor-in-chief of iPolitics. Lots of analysis of this meeting, of course, at cbc.ca nationally, and then we'll have the very latest once again at 7 o'clock as the ongoing analysis continues. Now, before we leave the issue of politics and world politics, I want to talk about what we're going to have coming up for you later in the program. We are going to take a closer look at the missile strikes in the contested Kashmir region, and we're going to get some important context from a geopolitical expert this morning. Tensions over that region of Kashmir flared, of course, yesterday when India fired missiles into the Pakistani-controlled section of the territory. So this is, of course, significant, and we're going to outline all of the things that are happening in that part of the world this morning. So stay tuned. We have a full interview about that in the second hour of the show. I'm Marcy Marcusa. The show is Information Radio. It's your morning show on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Just want to mention the local smoke could be a problem up around Dauphin, the Paw, and Flin Flon. And also just remind you that here in Winnipeg, you're going to want to remind yourself what they've said about bans on fire pits in your backyard. And so there are some burn bans because of the situation with all of the dryness out there all across Manitoba. But it does include the city of Winnipeg as well with some of these restrictions that we're going to have to be paying attention to. We have news coming up, and then we will also have a business news coming up. Christly Ramlicam will join us via Zoom. She's going to be talking also about the Carney-Trump meeting yesterday, but in addition to her business lens analysis of that meeting, she'll talk about more about the impacts of the trade war, and one of them being that WestJet continues to change its schedule. So that's all coming up right after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. It is 2 degrees. It's going to be a beautiful day. Sunshine, a high this afternoon of 21. Health officials are working to stem a rising tide of measles cases in southern Manitoba. The province warns of potential exposures at the Superstore in Winkler, as well as Boundary Trails Health Centre just outside the city. Dr. Devinder Singh is the medical director of health for the region. He says the relatively low vaccination rate in the area is concerning.
Those are the exact type of conditions for measles to spread and to spread quickly, because it is very contagious.
As of 2023, Southern Health had the lowest measles immunization rate for 7-year-olds in Manitoba at about 53%. Tanya Neponak's aunt continues to push for a search for her remains. Sue Caribou met yesterday with Manitoba government officials. Police believe Tanya Neponak's body was dumped in a garbage bin nearly 14 years ago and taken to Brady Road landfill. The province is planning to search for another First Nations woman, Ashley Shingoose, in that same landfill. Caribou wants to make sure a search for her niece will also happen. She was nervous heading into yesterday's meeting, and while she says there was no firm commitment, Caribou says she left feeling positive.
I'm really looking forward to working with these beautiful people that just make my day. I was very emotional and angry at the same time, but they made my day.
Police searched a small portion of the landfill for Neponak in 2012. They didn't find her remains and called the search off after a week. The United Nations is urging restraint, but Pakistan is calling it an act of war. This after India carried out multiple missile strikes overnight on Pakistani territory. More than 30 people have been killed, and Pakistan is said to be responding with shelling of its own. Prime Minister Mark Carney described his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House yesterday as constructive. He says the leaders are now fully engaged, adding there's a lot more work to do when it comes to our country's recent trade and tariff tensions. Trump indicated he liked Carney, saying there had been no tension at all during their talks. Carney did push back both publicly and privately on Trump's repeated claim Canada should become an American state. Now, Carney is expected to brief all the premiers today on his discussions with Trump and key administration officials. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Another prairie icon on the rural Manitoba landscape has been lost. Fire tore through the wooden grain elevator in Waskata yesterday. It's yet another elevator lost to fire, demolition, or disrepair. At its peak, Manitoba had more than 700 wooden grain elevators. But Gordon Goldsborough at the Manitoba Historical Society says that number keeps getting smaller.
The Manitoba Historical Society maintains what we call the grain elevator countdown. Countdown assuming that eventually we're going to get down to a very small number. And it presently stands at 115.
Around 60 of the remaining grain elevators are still in use. No one was hurt in yesterday's fire. A patient is suing a Winnipeg chiropractor, claiming he injured her during treatment and she suffered a stroke as a result. The lawsuit says the patient was taken from Maples Chiropractic and admitted to the Health Sciences Centre. It happened in 2023. The patient filed the lawsuit last week. The court document alleges the chiropractor failed to warn the patient about the risks associated with the treatment and specifically failed to warn her a stroke could occur. The allegations have not been tested in court, and the chiropractor has not filed a statement of defense. Winnipeg Jets coach Scott Arniel says the thrill of Sunday's double overtime win is behind them. Arniel says his team is focused on Game 1 of the Round 2 series against the Dallas Stars tonight. Arniel says different players have stepped up to get the Jets to this point, including goalie Connor Hellebuck.
It's about our team staying together, pulling each other along and pulling each other through the hard times. And that's kind of what everybody did for Helly. And now, you know what, we're expecting him to continue to play his part.
Arniel says center Mark Scheifele and defensemen Josh Morrissey and Logan Stanley will be game time decisions. It is a late start tonight. Puck drop at 8:30. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
And also, I just want to mention the playoffs for the PWHL because there's watch parties that are going on. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. A lot of people excited about the Professional Women's Hockey League. Game 1, Minnesota at Toronto, also goes at 7 o'clock tonight. So if you're fans of both leagues, you're going to have lots of hockey to watch. Right now, it is 6:36 a.m. It is Wednesday morning. It is May the 7th, and Abby Adeyemi has our regional forecast. Hello again.
Good morning once again. Chilly start across the province this morning, but most regions can expect plenty of sunshine and warming temperatures as the day goes on. We still have smoke affecting some areas in the northwestern part of the province. I will be telling you about that as we get through this. In the Red River Valley at this point, it is already sunny in Winnipeg, starting off at 2 degrees as the day moves on. Sunshine continues. We're heading for a warm high of 21 with mild winds from the south, though, this afternoon. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region, Modern Winkler, Altoona, Morris. Temperatures also around 2 degrees, aiming for a high of 22 today. We head west to Brandon. It is a crisp start. Brandon is at -3 at this point, but the day looks bright and sunny. Temperatures will climb to 20 degrees with breezy conditions from the south throughout the day. In Dauphin and the Parkland region, we're looking at chilly -6 this morning with sunny skies, some local smoke in the region, and that will be felt mostly in the afternoon. The winds will come from the south and it gets breezy at some point. You're heading for a high of 20. In Gimli, 1 at this point, clear conditions you are seeing in the Interlake region. Expect sunny skies, the sun already making its appearance. You should get to a high of 18 today. The breeze will also be coming from the south. Now we track the conditions into the northern region. We're looking at the Pa, Flin Flon and surrounding areas. Also, we have smoke there. Right now it is 1. The sun already made its appearance. Today will stay mainly sunny, but this local smoke will be felt. So it's going to spread to more areas as you get into late morning with the winds becoming breezy from the south, warming up to a high of 18 degrees. Thompson is at -1 at this time, also sunny there at this point. It's going to be sunny throughout the afternoon. Winds will develop from the south later. High will be around 15 degrees. And then further north, that's still staying cool. It's chilly this morning at -7. It's going to be mostly cloudy today. Now, there's a good chance of rain this evening for folks in Churchill. The winds will stay mild from the south. Highs will only get to 8 degrees. So in summary, Marcy, the Red River Valley region, the Interlake region, the Parkland region, Western Manitoba, we're going to see clear sunny conditions throughout the day. And that smoke is a concern in Dauphin, Flin Flon, and surrounding areas.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
The morning commute, Corey Funk is in to cover that.
Lovely commute so far, it appears. But if that's not the case for you, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey. And just a reminder to watch for everybody as well. I mean, it goes without saying probably, but I know that myself yesterday, even like with more cyclists and more people walking around, it's just traffic's just busier right now. 22 minutes to 7 o'clock on the morning show, and it's time for our business news report with Crystalie Ramlakan. Hello to you.
Hi, good morning, Marcy.
So lots of analysis today about the meeting between Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump yesterday. Break down for us what happened through a business lens.
Yeah, well, Prime Minister Mark Carney called his discussions with Trump wide-ranging and constructive. The two leaders addressed trade, Canadian sovereignty, and their country's defense relationship. And Carney and Trump pretty much agreed to disagree on the idea of Canada as the 51st state in their Oval Office meeting. Trump said, never say never, but Carney reiterated that Canada would never be for sale and did mouth never about 5 times when Trump was saying that. Now, in an answer to a reporter's question, Trump said there wasn't anything Carney could do or say to convince him to lift tariffs right now. But in a news conference in Washington after the meeting, Carney said he still pressed the case for tariffs to be removed. He says considerable efforts have been made to increase border security, specifically regarding fentanyl, which is one of the reasons Trump said he imposed tariffs in the first place. So here's Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Canada's contribution to this problem, cross-border problem, was always very small, but it's down by over 90% with the efforts. And it is an absolute focus of the government. So that is an example of where we would see the case being very strong for the tariffs to be removed. We've made that case. We'll see where that goes. In other areas, the tariffs are, in our view, not in the interests of American competitiveness and jobs. We have more work to do on making those cases on that.
And Carney confirmed that he and Trump will meet again in person at the G7 summit next month. And the Prime Minister plans to meet with Canada's premiers over the phone today.
All right, let's talk about what is happening in terms of the impacts of the trade war on the travel industry. WestJet has already changed some routes here in Manitoba, and now they're changing up more of their schedule, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the airline is suspending 9 routes between Canada and the U.S. due to lower demand. So a new route that was originally slated to start next week from Vancouver to Austin is now on hold until October. And other previously popular destinations, including flights to Orlando, Los Angeles, and Chicago, have also been halted for various periods between June and August. So, yeah, the changes show many Canadians are still avoiding the U.S. because of their trade war and President Trump's repeated assertions that Canada should be the 51st state. So WestJet says it continuously evaluates and adjusts its schedule to meet demand and will review if there's demand for these routes in the future. Meanwhile, WestJet has added domestic flights within Canada and services to Europe. And Air Canada has also been hit by the decision and decline in, U.S. flight bookings. So as a result, the company is adding flights to Latin America later in the year. And in March, Air Canada reported a 10% decline in bookings for flights between Canada and the U.S.
It's interesting because the Jets obviously got it around 1, and I simply posted on my Facebook page who's going to Dallas to watch the Jets, thinking if someone is going, maybe we'll be able to reach them down there. And I got schooled, as they say, 50 comments, and it was like a lot of people saying they're just not going to the States because of all the reasons that have been highlighted by different folks. Before we look at numbers this morning, I understand that Weight Watchers is filing for bankruptcy.
Yes. So the 62-year-old program that changed dieting for millions of people around the world is entering Chapter 11, which is supposed to bolster its financial position, increase investment flexibility, and better save its millions and better serve, its millions of members around the world. So the company, now known as WW International, has struggled with about $1.5 billion in debt and has struggled with other weight management options now on the market, such as GLP-1 medications. But during the bankruptcy process, the company expects its massive amount of debt will be eliminated. And the company says operations for its members will continue as normal. So WW International has had a rough few years after a turnaround plan from its former CEO failed. She was forced out of her position last September after just a 2.5-year stint. The former CEO bought a telehealth platform that connected patients with doctors who could prescribe weight management drugs. But the pivot didn't really work and stock has plummeted. And WW also took another hit last year when star investor Oprah Winfrey announced she was leaving the company's board after nearly a decade holding that position and ended up donating all of her stock to a museum.
What's up in the numbers this morning?
So in Europe, markets are edging lower. Germany is down, the UK is down, France is down. In Asia, stocks are mostly climbing. So Japan, though, is still down. Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is up. Oil is up 48 cents to $59.57 US per barrel. Gold is down 47.70 to $3,384.80 US per ounce. And the dollar is down just over a tenth of a cent to 72.5 cents US.
All right. Thanks very much, Crystal.
Okay. Thanks, Marcy.
That is business news. 6:45 a.m. is the time right now, and Rube and Rake have released a second single from their upcoming album. It's called Good Time After Bad. The St. John's-based duo said that they wrote this tune we're about to hear in, quote, a small cabin on the edge of a cliff. This is Rube and Rake on CBC. It's called Friend of a Friend.
It took 18 months of moving just to crawl up on our home. Word just stumbles down the mountain about an hour or so. But along the way, would your plans have changed? We were burning up the balsam, built the walls with alder plank, planting unfamiliar seed just hoping it would take. But along the way, would your plans have changed? Only when you hit the road will your burden show. Friend of a friend, could I ask you again? Just leave us be. Don't speak your mind the next time our paths meet. Couple days, not a hello from your neighbor. Any charm we had did fade, but along the way, would your plans have changed? Only when you hit the road will your burden show. Friend of a friend, could I ask you again? Just leave us be. Don't speak your mind the next time our paths meet.
That is Friend of a Friend. It's from an upcoming album called Good Time After Bad that is due out on May 9th, and it comes from a group out of St. John's, Newfoundland, a folk duo called Rube and Rake. It's 12 minutes to 7 o'clock now on CBC's Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. Beautiful day ahead for us here. Sunny and 2 right now, but it's going to be 21 in the sunshine, and there's no mention of wind after a couple of windy days. So should be just lovely in the city. Brandon, as Abby said, starting a little chillier right now. It's -3, but you'll get there too. It's going to be nicer later. And then Thompson's mainly sunny currently in -1. Local smoke up in Dauphin, the Paw, and Flin Flon could be a concern this morning. Well, next on the show, it's time for our medical column and a conversation about injuries like ankle sprains. With summer almost here, a lot of people taking advantage of the weather, getting back to exercise, sports, yard work. And with that increase in activity can come an increase, of course, in injuries, especially some of those minor injuries. It has people turning to the tried and true acronym of RICE for sports injuries. But recent evidence has shown that RICE might not be the best way to treat those sorts of injuries. And that's in our medical column today with Dr. Raj Bardwaj.
Good morning, Marcy.
So for people who don't know or can't recall, remind us what RICE, the acronym RICE, stands for.
Yeah, so RICE stands for Rest, Ice, Compression, and Elevation. That acronym's been around since 1978 when a sports medicine doctor wrote it up in a book. And the idea was that when you injure yourself, like you twist your ankle or you wrench your elbow or whatever, you were told to rest and then apply ice packs to the injured area for like 20 minutes at a time to reduce inflammation. Use compression, like a tensor bandage or a splint, to immobilize the area, and then elevate the injured body part above your heart to reduce swelling. It's a pretty handy acronym. It's been around for almost 50 years, but it is slowly falling out of favor.
And why are some doctors turning away from RICE for minor injuries?
Well, the problem is that, as we do more and more research on minor injuries and sprains and strains, the evidence is starting to poke holes in almost all of those 4 things. So there's some evidence that if you rest an injured body part for too long, that it can actually delay healing by making it more stiff and more sore. For ice, the idea was that you would, apply ice onto the injured area to prevent inflammation. But more and more, we're understanding that some inflammation is actually necessary for healing to occur. So if you ice it, too cold, too much at a time, too many days, then you could theoretically prolong recovery by limiting the inflammation that your body uses to trigger healing. For compression is actually the weakest link in the RICE acronym, and it has been for a long time. There's some studies that say it probably doesn't do much at all, and there are other studies that say, well, it immobilizes the area, and that, again, can reduce blood flow, reduce all sorts of things that can delay recovery. And then elevation is actually probably helpful, but you have to understand how and why you're doing it, or you end up spending a lot of effort on very little gain. So people are throwing out the RICE acronym and trying to come up with other sets of words that have a nice ring to them, to help guide people who are treating themselves after minor injuries like, ankle sprains and knee strains and sore shoulders, even minor low back pain.
So what are some of the other acronyms that are catching on now or have more of an evidence base to them as well, maybe?
Yeah, so there's been a bunch that people have sort of tossed out into the realm over the last bunch of years. So there was PRICE, which basically stands for protection plus RICE. There was POLICE, which stood for protection, optimal loading, ice, compression, and elevation. But again, it's got ice, it's got compression, things like that. There's another one, MEAT, which was movement, exercise, analgesia, which means painkillers, and then treatment like physio or massage. But not every injury needs physio or massage or even painkillers, so I can't get behind MEAT. And then the latest one, which I think is the hardest to remember, I had to write this down because I can't even remember it, and it's my job to communicate these things, but it's peace and love. Peace stands for protection, elevation, avoid anti-inflammatories, compression, education, and then love stands for load, optimism, vascularization, and exercise. Gosh, I almost messed that up because I had to
Rolls
refer
off
to my
the
notes.
tongue.
I can't.
No, it doesn't.
I can't remember all of that. And the problem is that, again, a lot of these have those sort of non-evidence-based things in there, like, compression and stuff like that. And some of them are just really confusing. And I think that's what made RICE so appealing, is that it was easy to remember. It was nice and simple.
What do you teach your patients then when they have minor injuries in terms of what to do at home and how to best recover?
Yeah, so I have come up with a little acronym, but I try to explain each piece of the acronym so that people really understand why we're telling them to do that. So I use the word PACE as a framework. PACE stands for protect, activate, cool, and elevate. So in terms of protect, basically you're protecting the injured body part from further injury. You're being mindful of it, you're not overdoing it, but you don't need to fully rest. And the other nuance here is that some pain is okay. It's not dangerous, it's just a signal to help you to protect the injured body part and to avoid injuring it more while it's healing. So P for protect. A in PACE is activate. Start doing some gentle movements to activate the muscles and soft tissues in the area so that they don't get too stiff and sore from being immobilized. C is for cool. So you're not going to ice it, you're just going to cool it down. You're going to put some cool water in a Ziploc bag, you're going to put that on the injured area for 5 or 10 minutes, not 20 minutes, just enough to reduce the pain. So if you cool the injured area, it really does help with the pain. And try not to do that for more than the first day or so. So if you have a gel pack that lives in the freezer because of RICE, take it out of the freezer, put it in the fridge. That's cool enough without being too cold. And then the E in PACE is still elevate, but you need to understand why and how. So people think that you need to elevate above your heart to decrease the swelling in your ankle or your knee or whatever. But the swelling is actually fluid that has leaked out of blood vessels, and it's just sitting in the tissues. So it really has nothing to do with your heart. It's going to slowly move with gravity, and just like water flows downhill. So if you want to get rid of some of the swelling in your ankle, you need to put the ankle uphill of your knee. If you want to get rid of swelling in your wrist, you need to put your wrist uphill of your elbow, and that's what will move the swelling. The level of your heart has actually very little to do with it. Swelling is uncomfortable, it reduces mobility, so elevation is still useful. So PACE, protect, activate, cool, and elevate. And then pace yourself on the road to recovery. Don't try to do too much too soon, but don't just lie there and hope that things that, just get better on their own. It takes work to make them better faster, and then that way you can get back to enjoying the summer.
You've mentioned a couple times, in this conversation about the use of medication. What's your take on using medication for pain?
Yeah, so remember, pain isn't dangerous. It's just a signal that helps you to avoid re-injuring yourself by doing too much too soon, which is why you want to pace yourself. But so if you can get away without using meds, then that's fine. But if you need something for your pain, then that's okay too. Remember, one of the main reasons that rice is falling out of favor is because we don't want to limit the inflammation too much or for too long. So when you do choose a medication for your pain, maybe choose just like a plain old painkiller, like acetaminophen, Tylenol, rather than an anti-inflammatory like ibuprofen, which is Advil, Motrin, or naproxen, which is Aleve. Those are all anti-inflammatories. And that's actually the opposite of what we used to say. We used to say, oh, take an anti-inflammatory, limit the inflammation, it'll help. It will help, but the inflammation, like I said, is part of the healing. So just plain old Tylenol, cool it down, pace yourself. If you do continue to need pain meds after the first couple of days, then think about, maybe this is a bigger injury than I thought, and maybe it's time to get checked out by a doctor or physio or something like that. I like the idea that, rice was catchy, it was easy, it was developed almost 50 years ago, but the science is evolving. And we're good at, science and medicine is good at sort of evolving with the evidence. So you should evolve with the evidence as well. Toss out rice, try to pace yourself through any injuries this summer. Remember, protect, activate, cool, and elevate.
All right, Dr. Bardwaj, thank you.
My pleasure.
That is our medical column with Dr. Raj Bardwaj, who joins us every Wednesday morning. We hear his column. Well, just looking at our CBC studios here, jackets are open and shades are on for people. It's nice and sunny. It's 2 degrees. Our high today is going to be 21, so it'll be nice. And then clear into tonight in downtown Winnipeg for the thousands that are going to gather for the Jets start of playoff round 2. So the low tonight is going to be 8 degrees, though. It's going to be a lot. It'll be nice tonight, but it's going to be cooler, of course, than it was on Sunday night for the Whiteout Party. Let's turn our attention right now to headlines. Heather Wells joins us with an update. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, some people in Winkler are worried about the rising number of measles cases. 10 cases have been confirmed in the Southern Health area since February. Recent exposure locations include the Winkler Superstore and Boundary Trails Health Center. Now, health officials say they are worried about the low vaccination rate in that area. Southern Health had the Manitoba's lowest rate of measles immunizations for children at the age of 7 as of 2023. So we'll hear more about that. Also, a patient is suing a Winnipeg chiropractor claiming he injured her during treatment and she suffered a stroke as a result. Those stories coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the commute this morning, besides needing to pay attention to the fact that it's bright, so sometimes you can't see everything, it's pretty good. Give us a call, 788-3093, though, if you see any problems on the commute this morning. Also, I want to mention the local smoke challenges up in Dauphin, the Pas, and Flin Flon, so your air quality could be a concern today. In the next hour of Information Radio, they call themselves a geeky choir. We're going to get a preview of their latest local show that features a live-action role-playing adventure. And some singing. Stay tuned. We'll take you there. Also at 7:40, the Jets' performance this season isn't the only one turning heads. We're going to hear more about the PWHL fans taking over a local bar. There's watch parties for round 1 in the Women's League that begins tonight as well. In addition, at 10 to 8, more on what Heather's just been mentioning about what has been happening with measles in this province. So we're going to run through the latest of what we know in some more detail. Stay with us. This is CBC's Information Radio on 89.3. And coming up next, it's the World Report, latest in national and international news.
On The Current.
We're about to choose the most famous man in the world.
Many of us know what we know about how cardinals choose the Pope from the movie Conclave. The movie is based on a book by Robert Harris, and Robert Harris is here today to talk about what he learned with rare behind-the-scenes access while writing his novel. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The United Nations, Britain, France, even Russia and China are all calling for restraint in Kashmir. They're trying to prevent a war between nuclear superpowers. Overnight, India targeted 9 sites in Pakistan's territory. It called it a measured response to attacks on India-administered Kashmir last month. But Pakistan says it's responding to an act of war. In total, 31 people have been reported dead this morning. For more, here is the CBC's South Asia correspondent, Salima Shivji.
The missiles were fired just after midnight.
India's military hitting 9 locations inside Pakistan and the part of contested Kashmir that Pakistan controls. Vikram Misri, India's foreign secretary, says the target was camps where militants are trained.
Measured, non-escalatory, proportionate, and responsible.
Pakistan does not see it that way, calling this an act of war over the Kashmir region, which both countries claim in full but only control in part. Lieutenant General Ahmed Sharif Chowdhury speaks for Pakistan's military.
Pakistan only responded in self-defense.
He says Pakistan is retaliating and claims it has already shot down several Indian fighter jets. And there were more explosions this morning from artillery fire exchanged along the contested border. The strikes come 2 weeks after a deadly militant attack that targeted tourists in Indian-controlled Kashmir, which India blames on Pakistan, a claim Islamabad denies.
Make sure that it stays below the threshold of a nuclear conflict.
Kshitij Bajpai, a senior South Asia research fellow at Chatham House in London, says when 2 nuclear powers exchange fire, there's always a fear it could spiral.
The risk of accidental escalation. There's limited external pressure on either party, and both sides have clearly developed a more assertive military posture in recent years.
The international community is calling for restraint, but the tensions are high in a long-standing conflict that has flared up decade after decade. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
Fighting is escalating between Israel and Houthi rebels in Yemen. This morning, officials are assessing the damage after Israel's airstrike at Yemen's main airport. And just days earlier, Iran-backed Houthi rebels claimed responsibility for a strike near Israel's airport in Tel Aviv. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik is following developments.
Passenger jets burned and black smoke billowed from Yemen's main airport, left disabled after 4 Israeli airstrikes. We will settle the score with anyone who attacks Israel, said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tuesday's retaliation was for a missile that almost hit Israel's international airport over the weekend, fired by Yemen's Houthi rebels. The Houthis have sent a steady stream of missiles and drones toward Israel, launched in anger at Israel's attacks on Gaza. Israel responded with strikes across Yemen, raising tensions.
Mark a grave escalation in an already fragile and volatile regional context.
UN spokesman Farhan Haq called for dialogue, but there's been little of that between the Houthis and Israel. The militants have, however, told Washington they will stop attacking international shipping in the Red Sea, says U.S. President Donald Trump.
They just don't want to fight.
He says that would end U.S. attacks on Yemen.
And we will stop the bombings.
There is no such truce with Israel. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Washington.
In illo tempore dixit Iesus discipulis suis.
Cardinals gather at St. Peter's Basilica for the Holy Mass for the election of the Roman Pontiff. The 133 men will soon enter the Sistine Chapel for the conclave. They will be locked inside and cut off from the outside world until they elect a new pope. The 267th pontiff will succeed the late Pope Francis. This conclave is unique. 108 of the 133 cardinals were chosen by Francis. Many of them come from countries that had never had a cardinal before. Reaching the 2/3 majority could prove difficult, given many of the cardinals are meeting for the first time. Canada's business community says it sees a path to ending the Canada-U.S. trade war, and it was U.S. President Donald Trump who may have cleared the way. At his meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday at the White House, Trump offered a strong defense of the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade deal. As Peter Armstrong tells us, some say that could be enough to reset relations.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's a great honor to have Prime Minister Mark Carney.
In an Oval Office known for blunt talk and a president famous for saying whatever's on his mind, there was a subtle but important message in yesterday's meeting between Donald Trump and Mark Carney.
Is USMCA dead?
No, it was actually very effective, and it's still very effective, but people have to follow it. So, that's been a problem.
That doesn't sound like much, but many heard that and felt Trump was offering a détente of sorts. Goldie Hyder, president of the Business Council of Canada, says he's been telling businesses that the path through the trade war lies within the confines of the Canada-US-Mexico free trade deal.
That's all we've been saying, and I think the president has opened a wide open door, and we need to drive through it.
Hyder says Carney and Trump are set to meet in person again at the G7 summit in Kananaskis, Alberta in June. Why not, he says, invite Mexico's president and use CUSMA as a way of resetting the trade relationship and jump-starting negotiations to end the trade war. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Washington.
In his meeting at the White House yesterday, Carney mentioned he will be reporting back to the country's premiers, so we expect a First Minister's meeting to happen later today. Former U.S. President Joe Biden is speaking out about Donald Trump and his administration. In his first interview since leaving the White House, Biden tells the BBC that Trump is failing to understand the strength of alliances like NATO. And Biden made it clear he does not like how Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was treated during his visit to Washington.
I found it sort of beneath America, the way that took place. And the way we talk about now that, it's the Gulf of America. Maybe we're going to have to take back Panama. Maybe we need to acquire Greenland. Maybe Canada should be. What the hell's going on here? What president ever talks like that?
Biden says America is about freedom, democracy, and opportunity, not confiscation. CBC News and international partners have identified a key person behind a notorious deepfake pornography site. He's a Canadian pharmacist, and he's connected to a website that hosted tens of thousands of non-consensual and sometimes violent deepfake videos and images. It targeted celebrities, politicians, influencers, and even private citizens. Eric Cito from the CBC's Visual Investigations Unit has the details.
We've been trying to talk to you for weeks. You're hearing our attempt to talk to a man named David Doe. He's not interested in commenting. Doe is a Canadian pharmacist in the Greater Toronto Area, a husband, and a key figure behind the most notorious deepfake porn site in the world. That's based on an investigation that linked usernames, IP addresses, and passwords to him. Online safety expert Adam Dodge says Mr. Deepfakes was a pioneer in the deepfake world, putting the faces of real people into sexually explicit and sometimes violent videos without their consent.
It's incredible, and I'm incredulous that this site has been allowed to survive this long. It is still a place where you can learn the tricks of the trade.
But the site was shut down last weekend following repeated requests for comment from CBC News and its international partners, Bellingcat and Danish outlets Chekta and Politiken. Deepfake porn often focuses on major celebrities like Michael Bublé and Emma Watson. But our investigation came across videos of regular people too, like Sarah Zed, a Canadian YouTuber. She was deepfaked.
Every time it is being used on some really big name celebrity like Taylor Swift, it emboldens people to use it on much smaller, much more niche, more private individuals like me.
Creating and distributing deepfake porn of adults isn't illegal in Canada, even though it is in places like Australia and the UK. Prime Minister Mark Carney promised to criminalize it during the election campaign. Eric Cito, CBC News, Toronto.
You can read about how our visual investigations team tracked down Mr. Deepfakes at cbcnews.ca. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
A sunny, bright start to our Wednesday morning here. Welcome, everyone, to the morning show. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're with CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. This is Information Radio. It's sunny and 3 degrees right now. We'll update your forecast for the day in a moment. It's going to be a beauty. This hour on the program, Manitoba's growing South Asian community and indeed the whole world is watching closely what is happening right now between India and Pakistan. You've just been hearing some of that on World Report, but we're going to have a closer look at those recent missile strikes in the contested Kashmir region, and we have context for you to air from a geopolitical expert that I spoke with just moments ago. So stay tuned for that. Also, this hour on Information Radio, amidst a flurry of exposure warnings and rising measles cases, some residents of a southern Manitoba town can't help but feel concerned for their health and safety. We're going to hear from the mayor of that town and more. Stay tuned. First to Heather Wells with our headlines on this on this Wednesday, May 7th. Heather?
Good morning. Well, the aunt of a woman whose remains are believed to be at a Winnipeg landfill hopes after a meeting with the province, there will be some action. Sue Caribou wants the Brady Road landfill to be searched for her niece, Tanya Nepanak. Nepanak was last seen nearly 14 years ago, and police believe her body was put in a garbage bin. The province is planning to look for the remains of Ashley Shingoose in that same landfill. So we'll hear the latest on that story. Manitoba has one less wooden grain elevator on the prairie landscape. A fire early yesterday morning destroyed the elevator in Waskada. It was built in 1961. Gordon Goldsborough at the Manitoba Historical Society says the fire leaves the province with just 115 wooden grain elevators. At their peak, there were more than 700 in the 1920s. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
One of the coolest stories that I ever covered about grain elevators was someone that was studying them and made a book about them. But what they did with all the images that they got along the way for their research, as I recall, is they wallpapered a whole room with them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like grain elevators all over the place. I'll have to find that today. What a loss for Waskada.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you know what? And people really do value them. The town nearest to the farm where I grew up is Inglis, where there are 4 standing elevators, and they're really something to see.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Well, we'll hear more reaction from Waskada on the loss of their elevator and what would happen to. Right now, let's find out what's going to be happening in our weather forecast. Abby Adiyami.
It's a cool start across the province, but don't worry, the sun is already shining in most regions, and things will warm up nicely as we move through the day. Areas like Dauphin, the powerful influence surrounding areas will be seeing smoke in the air, but overall it's going to be bright and sunny for most of the regions. Right now, Winnipeg, it's sunny, it's chilly, it's 3 degrees. You might want to keep the jacket and grab your sunglasses. Clear skies, making it bright morning, warming up to a high of 21.
And Corey, the commute?
Very quiet commute, but if you're walking, bike, and driving, you see something, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, tensions over the contested region of Kashmir flared yesterday. India fired missiles into the Pakistani-controlled section of the territory. India targeted multiple sites in that region and in Pakistan's Punjab province. Now, if back-and-forth retaliatory actions continue, experts are concerned the situation between the countries could escalate. To talk about the strikes and where we're at this morning, Tina Park joined me at 7 o'clock for a conversation. She is CEO of the Park Group, a global consulting firm focusing on international affairs, and vice president of the NATO Association of Canada. Here's our conversation.
Good morning, Marcy.
So we have been hearing some detail, obviously, since this started yesterday and on our international and national news. But what can you tell us about this missile strike and what it looks like this morning?
Well, it's absolutely troubling what's happening there. Yesterday, India launched Operation Sindoor and conducted missile strikes on 9 sites in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. And India stated that these strikes targeted militant infrastructure linked to the April 22nd attack in Pahalgam. But Pakistan claims otherwise and condemned these strikes as an act of war and that the missile strikes actually targeted civilians. And at the moment, Pakistani security officials reported at least 26 civilian deaths and 46 injuries, as well as damage to a mosque in Bahawalpur. And in retaliation, Pakistan claims to have shot down 5 Indian fighter jets, which has not yet been confirmed by India. But there has also been damage to critical water infrastructure, and commercial air traffic is being rerouted. And along the line of control, heavy artillery fire has resumed with civilian casualties on both sides. So the situation remains extremely volatile.
India and Pakistan are both nuclear countries. Is there a fear of escalation? I mean, obviously there is, but how does that fact inform the international response to this?
Well, absolutely. You know, both India and Pakistan are nuclear powers, and India has a no first use policy, meaning that it would only use nuclear weapons in retaliation. But Pakistan, on the other hand, has signaled that it could use nuclear weapons first if it felt that the survival was at risk. So it's, very dangerous what's going on. And we're not necessarily talking about an intentional warfare, but the risk of miscalculation being very real. And, both sides are using drones and cyber capabilities and even AI-assisted targeting. And these AI tools can act much faster than human decision makers can react. And that's where the unintended escalation becomes a real possibility.
What are you thinking that Canada's and others, should be advocating for around in the coming days around this?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to use everything in our power and our influence to advocate for diplomacy. We need to cool things down. And I know that this is a very serious matter for many Canadians because Canada is home to over 1.5 million people of South Asian descent. And a lot of them have deep family, cultural, and emotional ties to both India and Pakistan. So when the tensions rise over Kashmir, the impact is also felt here in our communities and in our conversation and even in our politics. But beyond that, I think there's the issue of Canada's role in the world. We've made the Indo-Pacific a strategic priority and peace and security in the region is of great interest to Canada. So any, escalation of conflict between India and Pakistan, particularly if it spins out of control, doesn't just threaten local stability, but it would disrupt shipping routes and global supply chains, and the kind of regional cooperation that Canada has been working very hard to build. So I think we need to uphold international norms and protecting civilians. And as a member of G7, Canada has a voice and a responsibility when it comes to supporting diplomacy and preventing further violence.
And just last before you go this morning, remind us of the background of this tension over the Kashmir region.
Yes, it's a historic issue, actually, and that goes back nearly 80 years ago, in 1947, to be precise, during the partition of British India. And since then, Kashmir has become one of the world's most dangerous flashpoints because it's controlled in part by India and in part by Pakistan, and even China controls a part of it. But both India and Pakistan claim Kashmir in its entirety. And since, some 80 years ago, the two neighbors have been fighting over this mountainous territory that is now divided by a de facto border called the Line of Control. And there have been many escalations over the last few decades. But right now, today's world, we're looking at a tougher, forward-leaning military in place in Pakistan. And the military has a big influence in the running of the country. So any compromise that is politically sensitive is domestically unpopular. And the region has certainly seen decades of armed insurgency and cross-border militancy, with India accusing Pakistan of sponsoring terrorism and Pakistan claiming that it's defending Kashmiri Muslims. So the tensions are amplified by national identities and narratives, as well as unresolved historical grievances, as well as, domestic considerations, because Prime Minister Modi has a real opportunity here to strengthen his rule and, popularity with his domestic population for defending India's interest. And it really remains to be seen how all of this will play out.
All right, Tina, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's my conversation with Tina Park. I spoke with her at 7 o'clock. She is CEO of the Park Group and Vice President of the NATO Association of Canada. Nice sunshine this morning in Winnipeg at 7:20 currently, and our high today is going to be 21 degrees. Well, up next on CBC, it's time to release your inner or maybe outer Wizard, rogue, or barbarian? A Dungeons & Dragons a cappella musical has been created by a group of local singers. Tatum's Bardic Inspiration Show brings the tabletop game to life with players, costumes, and songs. CBC Manitoba's community reporter Shanley Vidal stopped by their rehearsal this week.
Brothers of the bride, rejoice, might rejoice, swing, swing, swing. Raise your voice, sing, sing, sing. Down and down into the deep, who knows what we'll find beneath? Diamonds, rubies, gold, and more.
My name is Michael Penner. I am a bass in the choir. I wrote the script for this show, and I have also been arranging a lot of the music that we do. This isn't your normal choir performance. The choir is here to add to the experience of a fully scripted, acted out show. So we're calling this an a cappella musical. It's not your typical musical where the actors are doing the singing. You've got the actors doing their thing, and then the choir is providing the music.
I need a hero. I'm holding up for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong, and he's gotta be fast, and he's gotta be fresh from the fight.
And then the music's going to weave in and tell that story.
Yes.
So what is it going to look like? Are there going to be any props or costumes?
Oh, lots of costumes. We've got dragon heads. We've got an orc bard with his ukulele. We've got a halfling rogue with her bow and arrow. We've got a couple dwarves. We've got a dragonborn. There is a section of our choir that is very much into live action role play, and so we had access to all of their costumes, and that was really helpful.
Which one is Ashley?
Oh, Taylor just went out to get her. She just arrived.
You nervous?
A little.
My name is Dylan Hatcher. I play the role of Alex, who is the dungeon master in Tatum's Bardic Inspiration. His character, it's all an effort to impress one character in particular that he likes, has a crush on. And so they go on an adventure to rescue this princess. They go through all sorts of mines, and they meet all kinds of creatures, and they kind of also figure out how to play the game.
How is the show going to work? We're going to have the actors on stage, and they're going to be kind of led through this adventure, and the choir, they're going to be performing as well. What's going to be happening?
The show is going to be like a series of scenes with some breaks for songs in between that are very thematic with what's kind of going on in the show. And so there's going to be songs from all sorts of like nerdy stuff. There's songs from Game of Thrones, songs from How to Train Your Dragon, songs from the Dungeons & Dragons movie, of course. So if you love that kind of, sort of musical experience, you're going to get that here.
Dylan Hatcher is also a dungeon master in the real world and is currently running 3 separate D&D campaigns.
Sometimes, we feel like we don't have enough power to make a difference in the world. So when we play Dungeons & Dragons, the players, they do get to have that power. They do get to kind of have some semblance in what the world is like. They get to shape the world, and I think that's really empowering.
It's community cooperative storytelling. Lots of people in the nerdy side of things really like playing games, but the competitive aspect kind of keeps people like at odds with each other. We've all heard about losing friends over Monopoly. But in Dungeons & Dragons, you're not against each other, you're against the story.
Shanley Vidal, CBC News, Winnipeg.
You'll only hear the knock, knock, knock of your own heart, a signal.
And United Church in Winnipeg. We're about to turn our attention to morning sports, but I do want to mention that we had a call on our commuter line. Julie called saying emergency vehicles right now are blocking at least 2 lanes of eastbound Cumberland at Edmonton, and it is starting to get backed up. So thanks for the call, Julie. Cumberland at Edmonton eastbound. 788-3093 is where you can reach us with any other updates this morning. Next on CBC, it's time for morning sports, and the Jets open up their second round series tonight. Let's tee this up with Scott Regier, who joins us live via Zoom. Hello.
Hey, Marcy.
What do you got for us as we get ready for this series?
Well, yeah, second round series, which is a phrase we haven't heard in a while. Not since losing to Montreal in the bubble playoffs has Winnipeg made it past the opening round. Part of that does have to do with goaltending. We all know about Connor Hellebuck's travails in the postseason as opposed to the regular season where he always flourishes. In Game 7, when Connor let in a couple of early goals, it looked like it might be another summer of questioning his playoff abilities. Then heading into the third period of regulation against the Blues, he told his teammates, "I'm not allowing another goal in," and that proved to be right.
There was definitely a moment there where I was able to take my game to another level, and feeling that gives you some momentum and some confidence moving into the next round. And that being said, we're in some new territory that we haven't been in a while, so I'm really excited. It's a restart for me. Who cares about what just happened? We got through it, and moving forward here, I'm really excited to put my best foot forward and do my job.
Yeah, it'll be a tough go against Dallas, you would think. The Stars are set to welcome their top winger, Jason Robertson, and their top defenseman, Miro Heiskanen, back from injury, although their coach, Peter DeBoer, would not commit to either of those guys playing tonight. And for what it's worth, Jets coach Scott Arniel had similar words when it comes to Mark Scheifele and Josh Morrissey's availability. So we'll stay tuned. Puck drop 8:30 tonight, Marcy.
All right, it's going to be nice in downtown Winnipeg, folks. Our low is 8 degrees. So not as warm as Sunday, but 8 degrees is fine for Manitoba.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be like that. 8:30 puck drop. Bring some layers.
Yeah, bring a toque.
Meantime, Edmonton's taken an early lead in their playoff series with Vegas, right?
Yeah, the Oilers have been bizarre in these playoffs. They continue to fall behind in their games. They did again against Vegas last night, 2-0 in the first period. But then they continue the trend of coming back from those deficits and winning for the 5th straight time. That's what happened. Edmonton prevailed 4-2. We've never seen so many comeback wins in the playoffs by a team before. Chris Knobloch, Edmonton's coach, says that's down to players who've been there and done that.
That's part of having a mature, older group. Those players have seen a lot, and a lot of good things, a lot of bad things. And they know that during the playoffs, things fluctuate. There's a lot of things that can stress out the team. No matter what happens, I think we handle it really well.
There you are, Chris Knobloch. The Oilers have certainly had their share of stressors. You look at the end of the regular season, almost every one of their stars was injured. Then in the postseason, starting goalie Stuart Skinner, he couldn't find his game. But now, Marcy, Edmonton's healthier. Skinner's been more than capably replaced by Calvin Pickard. And now, much to Vegas' chagrin, the Oilers are the betting favorites to win the Stanley Cup. The Jets might have something to say about that, though, by the time all is said and done.
Let's move from the ice now. Before you go this morning, you have stories involving both turf and yarn.
Yeah,
is that
as
right?
for the turf, yes, that is correct. The turf is the one on Princess Auto Stadium, which has a kickoff tonight of 7 o'clock as Valor FC begins its Canadian Championship campaign. It's been a tough slog in the Canadian Premier League. Valor still hasn't won. Tonight they'll face against the BC-based team TSS Rovers in the Canadian Championship, so good luck to them. As for the yarn...
Do you cheer for a high-character team that refuses to play with a lead? Can your nervous system not tell the difference between being on the penalty kill and being attacked by a bear? If any of these resonate with you, you might need an emotional support playoff chicken.
That is part of a TikTok video, Marcy, put together by Oilers superfan Ashley Sinclair, who has been busy crocheting, as you heard there, emotional support playoff chickens.
Yeah.
They're about the size of a baseball, decked out in Oilers blue and orange, and filled with 97 grams of pellets. 97, of course, Connor McDavid's number. Other fans have been flocking to buy these chickens, and media outlets flocking to interview Sinclair, who admits she has purchased some special silver sparkle yarn.
Love it.
Well, just in case.
Love it, love it. What you don't know about me is I went to the East Coast and my friend and I were obsessed with these crocheted chickens. They were everywhere. Everywhere, but they were huge. They were more like hens. So I like the idea of something you could hold in your hand, a little chicken. We need maybe Jets chickens.
It's sheer white.
I like
Whiteout
it.
chicken.
Little whiteout chicken. Someone's going to do that before the end of the show and tell me they're already doing it.
They will. They'll be doing it right now.
All right, thank you. We'll see how this goes tonight, this game, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
That's Scott Regarrett with Morning Sports. Still ahead, we're going to take you inside a watch party for a PWHL game that starts tonight. Let's not forget about that. That's after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 3 degrees. We are warming up today. Lots of beautiful sunshine. A high this afternoon of 21, and not bad overnight tonight either, although we will see a bit of a south breeze blowing. Some people in Winkler are worried about the rising number of measles cases. 10 cases have been confirmed in the Southern Health region since February. Recent exposure locations include the Winkler Superstore and the Boundary Trails Health Center. Adina Ham lives outside Winkler.
I'm concerned because there are quite a bit of people around this area that don't vaccinate their kids. And my kids are vaccinated, but I think there's still a risk for my kids, which is a little scary.
As of 2023, Southern Health had Manitoba's lowest rate of measles immunizations for children at age 7. Officials say they're doing outreach and encouraging vaccinations, and at least 276 doses have been given in the past 2 weeks. We'll hear more on this story coming up in this next half hour right here on Information Radio. The aunt of a woman whose remains are believed to be in a Winnipeg landfill is hopeful after a meeting with the province. Sue Caribou wants the Brady Road landfill to be searched for her niece, Tanya Nepanak. She was last seen in the city nearly 14 years ago. Police believe her body was put in a garbage bin. Now, the province is planning to look for the remains of Ashley Shingoose in that same landfill. Caribou met with government officials yesterday and wants to make sure a search for Nepanak is included in those efforts.
I'm Tanya's voice. My family that were murdered, I'm their voice, and I want to do things in a good way for my family.
Police searched a small portion of Brady Road landfill for Tanya Nepanak in 2012. They didn't find her remains and called the search off after a week. Prime Minister Mark Carney is scheduled to update the premiers today on his visit to the White House. Carney says his trip to Washington yesterday is the start of a long process aimed at bringing trade stability back to the Canada-U.S. relationship. The Catholic Church begins voting to elect a new pope starting today. The conclave of cardinals takes place behind closed doors in the Sistine Chapel. This morning, the cardinals gathered for a holy mass at the Vatican. The first ballot will be held this evening. Starting tomorrow, 4 votes will happen each day until a new pope is elected. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A patient is suing a Winnipeg chiropractor, claiming he injured her during treatment and she suffered a stroke as a result. The lawsuit says the patient was taken from Maples Chiropractic and admitted to the Health Sciences Centre. It happened in 2023. The patient filed the lawsuit last week. The court document alleges the chiropractor failed to warn the patient about the risks associated with the treatment and specifically failed to warn her a stroke could occur. The allegations have not been tested in court. The chiropractor has not filed a statement of defense. Well, brace yourself for an alert. The province is testing its national public alerting system today. At 1:55 this afternoon, an emergency alert message will go out on TV, radio, and compatible wireless devices. Now, if you don't get the alert test, there could be a number of reasons. The province says they range from bad network connection to poor cell coverage or your device software and settings. Manitoba has one less wooden grain elevator on the prairie landscape today. A fire early yesterday morning destroyed the elevator in Waskada in southwest Manitoba. It was built in 1961 and was still being used for grain storage. Gordon Goldsborough at the Manitoba Historical Society thinks the loss of that elevator will have a symbolic impact.
For as long as most people in that area can remember,
there has been this elevator sort of on the horizon. You know, as you're driving towards Wascata, it's often the first thing you see from great distance, and it's gone now.
Goldsboro says the fire leaves the province with just 115 wooden grain elevators. At their peak, there were more than 700 in the 1920s. Around 60 of Manitoba's remaining wooden elevators are still in use. They have been replaced over the years with larger, more modern concrete elevators. You can find more on that story and other news from Manitoba. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks, Heather Wells. Let's get to Abby now. Abby Adeyemi has our regional forecast on the morning show next. What's up?
Good morning. It's a sunny one. Cool start across the province this morning. Sunshine expected in most of the regions, but we still have smoke and clouds that will be drifting from the south central into the north as we get into the day. Conditions down south, it is chilly start in Winnipeg at 3 degrees at this point. Skies are clear. The sun is out. It's going to stick around for most of the day. Expect a high of 21 degrees today with some southerly winds. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region, Modern, Winkler, Altoona, and Morris, all the way down to the U.S. border where it's around 2 degrees at this point. Sunny conditions also, temperatures climbing to 22 this afternoon. We head west to Brandon, sunny, a bit cooler there, -1. We're tracking at that part of the province. Expect clear skies through the day. You warm to 20 degrees. The winds will also come from the south and get breezy at some point. Down in Dauphin and the Parkland region where we're seeing that local smoke, it is already sunny there. It's still cold, -3 this morning. Expect clear skies later. You warm up to 20 degrees, but the local smoke will develop into more regions as you get into the afternoon with winds coming from the south. Tonight remains clear, and then that smoke will hang around into tomorrow. For the Interlake region, we're looking at chilly 1 at this point under sunny conditions. Also in Gimli, expect a sunny day ahead, warming up to 18 degrees. Up in the powerful influence surrounding areas 2 at this point, mainly sunny skies. We're seeing local smoke also in that region, and you will feel it as you get into the afternoon period in other communities. You warm up to 18 degrees. Then we track conditions in Thompson, where we're seeing partly cloudy skies this morning, 1 degree. Expect a mainly sunny day. You warm up to 15, though the winds will be picking up from the south later as you get into the afternoon. And then further north in Churchill, -5 this morning, mostly cloudy. Expect mainly cloudy day. There's a chance of rain in the forecast and a mild southerly breeze. Highs will only get to 8 degrees for folks in Churchill today. So in summary, from the Red River Valley all the way into the Interlake region, we're looking at sunny skies warming up, and that's going to be similar conditions for Brandon, Gimli, and the Pembina Valley region, but up north it's more like cloudy conditions, and that smoke will be a concern from the central into the northern part of the powerful influence surrounding areas.
Got a call on the commuter line from Julie, who said there are emergency vehicles blocking eastbound Cumberland at Edmonton. If you're wondering where that is, that's right kind of the northern tip of Central Park there. Lots of emergency vehicles blocking at least 2 lanes there, but not exactly sure which ones are being blocked. So just heads up there, kind of a fluid situation. But if you do see something going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. If you have any updates, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey Funk.
Thank you.
You are with Information Radio, CBC's morning show. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube, wherever you're listening from. Thank you. And wherever you're watching from, thanks for joining us as well. Well, speaking of watching, everyone's talking so much about Stanley. What about Walter? The Walter Cup, that is. The Jets' whiteout street parties and the game aren't the only celebrations taking the city by storm. So tonight, Jets round 2 does begin at 8:30. But why don't you watch the PWHL first? A puck drop at 6 o'clock between Minnesota and Toronto in the Professional Women's Hockey League. And so there's 4 teams vying for the Walter Cup. There's Minnesota, Toronto. Their game 1 is tonight. And already playing, there is Montreal versus Ottawa. So they have 1 game under their belt in that series. Well, there are watch parties going on around town. Let's go to a place that's hosting one tonight. Next door is a female-owned resto pub. It's located on Sherbrooke Street. It's beside Good Neighbor Brewing Company. And Lauren Seidel is a managing partner over there and with us now live. Good morning.
Good morning.
So why are you guys having watch parties for the PWHL?
I mean, clearly Winnipeg loves to watch hockey. Playoff hockey is so exciting. But, women's sport often gets overlooked, or overshadowed by, our men's sports and our NHLs and all of that. So for us, we're a women-owned company. We have several, women in leadership positions or ownership positions at our company who play sports at a high level and, played hockey in university and all that great stuff. So we really like to try to, amplify the female presence as much as we can.
Now, I mentioned there was already one game, and then tonight is puck drop on the second series because there's 4 teams in the PWHA playoffs, and they do best of 5, so there's slight differences to the men's league. Did you guys have a watch party already for the other game, or is this watch party number 1?
Yeah, you know what? We play every game that we can. Right now, obviously, the timing's a little bit tricky because we've got the double playoffs. So if the Jets game's on, we'll play the Jets game, but otherwise the PWHL playoff games are all on our TVs.
Does the desire for this come, as a business person, obviously, there's a desire to there's a spinoff from this. But you said that sort of the roots are more in celebrating and supporting women's sport. Are you an athlete yourself, or just a fan?
I'm an athlete as well. Morgan and Amber, the owners of Good Neighbor, also both played hockey at a high level in university. So PWHL definitely has a special place in their hearts, and it's so fun to watch the game with them, and they have so much knowledge and clearly so much passion, and it's so great that they are now able to watch a professional women's hockey league.
Right. How long before we might see a team in that league from Winnipeg, do you think? Because that was a big topic of conversation here yesterday in our newsroom.
I would say I'm no expert here, but I feel like our market would definitely support it. Clearly, we're a big hockey town, as our Jets whiteout parties are selling out in under a minute. I think that I think that would be great. I think it would be phenomenal. I think that the city would definitely rally behind a female hockey team.
Who shows up for the games when you're playing them at Next Door? Do you have some regulars now that are coming out, or are you attracting new folks?
Yeah, you know what? I would say it's a combination. We definitely have some folks who come out for virtually every game. But, the messages on Instagram or emails from new people asking if we're playing the PWHL games has definitely increased as well.
Tell me a bit more about the business. Next Door, as I mentioned, is beside Good Neighbor Brewing Company. So you guys are kind of just, resto pub, as we mentioned on the side there. You talked about the business being female owned. I'm wondering whether or not that's infused into other philosophies outside of what you're doing with the PWHL watch parties.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're Good Neighbors restaurant. So, we're very backed by Good Neighbor and all of their values. So very community driven. I'd also say in our restaurant, we have a large number of women in leadership positions, which is really important to us. The restaurant industry, the beer industry is pretty male dominated still. So we like to do our part to try and, support other women, bring other women up with us, and do what we can.
Do you have anything big planned for the finals? I know that most of your watch parties, are around obviously watching the game, some food, some trivia, but what's your plan to push through the rest of the playoffs here for the PWHL?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll often do food features during the playoff games, and we'll do some, beer features. After we get the schedule for the finals, we'll put something fun together. Last year we had, some fun trivia during the game. We had, some great food features. Some pitchers of beer on special. We had some prizes to give away. It was a blast. So once that schedule is released and we're through the semis here, we'll put something together for sure. All
right, Lauren, thank you very much for telling us about this morning, and have fun watching the game or games tonight if you make it all the way through.
I know, you got it. It's the doubleheader today.
It is, yeah. All right, take care.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
That's Lauren Seidel, managing partner at Next Door. So, we're talking about the Professional Women's Hockey League, PWHL. They're in their semifinals now. So there's 4 teams. As I mentioned, these are best of 5 games. We have the semifinals beginning today. Game 1, Minnesota at Toronto at Coca-Cola Coliseum. Puck drop is at 6 o'clock if you want to check it out. There is a watch party at Next Door. And then the doubleheader, of course, is alluding to the fact that game will just be wrapping up, and you can catch the Jets versus Dallas starting at 8:30.
Terry O'Reilly reads a lot of books while researching Under the Influence, and often he stumbles on great stories that don't fit into regular episodes, like the Bible with a wicked typo. Whoops! A hit song about a hot air balloon. And live from New York! Bookmarks on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
We did have a problem at Edmonton at Cumberland. Cumberland and Edmonton, rather eastbound. Cumberland is the problem. So we heard there were emergency vehicles there. This is from Julie. Now, this is within the last 40 minutes. So it may be, in fact, clear by now. But you can update Corey on our commuter line at 788-3093. Otherwise, you should have a pretty nice morning. Lots of people looking happy walking to work this morning. Shades on, jackets open, getting ready for a nice day. 3 degrees and sunny right now in Winnipeg, 1 degree and sunny in Brandon. -1 in Brandon. And in Thompson, it's 1 degree, and it is partly cloudy. Winnipeg's going to head for a high of 21. It should be clear tonight. Winds will be south at 20 and a low down to 8 if you are going to that party downtown, the Whiteout party downtown. Well, next on the program, let's return to one of the leads in our news today. Provincial health officials are once again warning of new sites in southern Manitoba where you may have been exposed to measles. Yesterday, officials sent out a warning for an elementary school in Dugald. That's a village just east of Winnipeg. Earlier this week, Manitoba Public Health warned of possible exposure at the Superstore in Winkler and Boundary Trails Health Centre. Our province is up to 10 confirmed and 4 probable cases of measles. All of those confirmed cases are in the Southern Health region. Dr. Devinder Singh is a medical officer of health for Southern Health.
Broadly speaking, Southern Health Santé Sud has lower immunization rates than other regions within Manitoba. This is vaccine preventable. Large outbreaks are completely preventable if you get enough people immunized. So we're seeing spread because of lower immunization rates.
CBC's Rosanna Hempel visited the Superstore in Winkler with the exposure warning, the store that had that exposure warning. And while there, she spoke with residents Henry Wiebe and Adina Ham about how they're navigating the news. Here's what Henry said.
The exposure alert that we got was for this location. Did you know about that?
Yes, I did.
And do you feel comfortable going, shopping and everything like that?
Well, I do because our family has been vaccinated, and so we're okay going about the neighborhood.
What have people been talking about? Like, how are people talking about this topic?
Well, I think it's along the lines that we shouldn't be dealing with this type of thing, as I mentioned before. And just the fact that the vaccinations are readily available, and so I hear quite a lot of that. We have family in the medical profession at Boundary Trails, and there's obviously a lot of people that are coming in to get vaccinated, and so that's a really good thing to hear.
Vaccination, is that kind of a taboo topic?
It isn't in our family, obviously, with being connected with the medical profession, but I hear a lot, or we hear a lot more of the negative side of vaccination. That's, of course, just my perspective, but that's out there, that sentiment is out there, and I think it's unfortunate because I think there's a lot of misinformation being put out there, and the medical profession does a wonderful job, and when we don't go and look after ourselves, they also bear the brunt of that.
There are quite a bit of people around this area that don't vaccinate their kids, and my kids are vaccinated, but I think there's still a risk for my kids, which is a little scary. I'm not sure if adults are supposed to get revaccinated, but just getting measles as an adult is really scary, and any child really. I've heard the cases are climbing quite a bit. So yeah, I definitely have a concern for measles and the children that are exposed to those people that aren't protected. So we did get sent a little pamphlet from the school to encourage vaccinations because it is on the rise. So yes, I have seen some concern, but like I said, I live in an area outside of town that is very much unvaccinated for everything. So I don't think there's any rules for kids to be vaccinated before they can attend school. They just kind of go. So the case in the U.S. is really scary because somebody died, and yeah, it could have been prevented, and people don't seem too concerned, but it is concerning for me. So,
were you happy with the level of response from the health region?
The letter is pretty minimal, I guess, but I guess you can't force it on anybody, so I'm not sure if there needs to be some more action taken, maybe to focus on like the dangers and what happened in the past and learn from that. So that's all I would say they should maybe do. We don't want to have another child getting really sick and dying, so that, yeah, I guess they could do a bit more.
So that was Rosanna Hempel speaking with Winkler residents Henry Wiebe and Adina Ham on a windy day yesterday. Of course, she was out at the Superstore in Winkler. That is the store that had one of the exposure warnings for measles. Now, while in the city of Winkler, she also met with the mayor, Henry Siemens. He believes that communication is key to monitoring the cases.
Healthcare isn't a municipal mandate that falls with the province, and education isn't a municipal mandate. It falls with the school division, but they've been good at keeping us in the loop and letting us know that this has happened and this is our plan and this is how we're going to approach it. I think one of the things that we've found is that whenever we communicate quickly and clearly with each other, we stand a greater chance of not catching anybody off guard with something and then being able to know what's happening.
And have you heard, whether that's been helpful at catching some cases early?
I don't know that we've heard anything along those lines at all. The cases have been quite low, thankfully. But I do know whenever we have a situation of any kind that's health related, the more information we have, the earlier, the more we stand a greater chance of catching it and making sure that it doesn't spread.
Does the council have a position on, vaccinations or encouraging anything like that?
Absolutely, we do. We believe that everyone should talk to their doctor and then together with their doctor make the best decision for their family.
Are you concerned that this could, that there could be a lot more cases?
I don't know that I could be concerned in that regard. I think as a community, we want to be careful in all aspects, just like every community should when there has been an exposure. Past that, from what I've seen so far, Manitoba Health has done a great job of communicating those pieces when it has happened, which gives the community the greatest chance at success at making sure we minimize whatever is happening in the community.
Okay. Anything else that we can learn, because this might happen to another health region, anything else that we can...
I think the biggest thing that we should and could and will learn from, are learning from, is that really good, clear communication very quickly is key. And we've seen that so far, and so far that's certainly helped. From a very contagious, easily communicable type of disease, the numbers have been quite low, and I believe to a large part that has been because the communication has been so good.
So that was Winkler Mayor Henry Siemens, and you can read more about the story on our website and what's happening with measles in Manitoba at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
The CBC Music Top 20. CBC Music Live.
All right.
Savor the flavor of the Francophone world on C'est Formidable. Experience the next wave of Indigenous music with Reclaim. The global sounds of frequencies. End your day or start your late night with music on CBC Radio 1. Weeknights at 11, 11:30 in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
And of course, on CBC during the day, you can hear music, but also hear about it when the artists are interviewed. Today on Q, she went from posting music on MySpace to a worldwide pop star. Talking about Lights, originally from Timmins, Ontario, but traveled the world with her missionary parents, and by her teenage years had already written hundreds of songs. Her latest record's called A6. It's a synthwave album. It's inspired by the sights and sounds of Berlin and her time there. So Lights will be on Tom Power with Tom Power today on Q to talk about the new record. Meantime, here's a bit of music from Lights with White Paper Palm Trees.
Why don't you come down and meet me? Why do you act like you don't care? I'm not gonna ask you permission. Don't need to chase you anywhere. Find me, you're up and on socials. Call back to February air. Hand it to myself, I'm better than ever now, I swear. I'm not the same as who I was at the time. Had a lot of love for you, but you let me down. How days go by that you are not on my mind.
Lights and white paper palm trees. Going to be talking about this new album with Tom Power later this morning on Q, right here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Well, no palm trees, but the trees we do have are going to be not as active as they have been swinging these gusty winds the last couple of days. Wow, it's going to be calmer in Winnipeg today. Quick look at weather and traffic here. Today, sunny in the city of Winnipeg, high 21. And as I mentioned, winds will be calm. Some beautiful sunshine downtown right now. We do have an issue in traffic that is building, actually. Mandeep called the commuter line with an update on Cumberland and Edmonton. Cumberland's now completely closed between Edmonton and Hargrave. There's a number of emergency vehicles on scene, so you want to find an alternate route if you plan to drive through the area. So that is Cumberland completely closed between Edmonton and Hargrave in the heart of downtown here. So avoid that area if you can. Find another route. Thanks for the call, Mandeep. 788-3093 if you do want to update our traffic and commuter line. And I see it ringing now. So in fact, there might be another update after our headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the aunt of a woman whose remains are believed to be in a Winnipeg landfill is hopeful after a meeting with the province. Sue Caribou wants the Brady Road landfill to be searched for her niece, Tanya Nipanak. She was seen last nearly 14 years ago. And a patient is suing a Winnipeg chiropractor, claiming he injured her during treatment and she suffered a stroke as a result. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, national and international news is coming up at 8 o'clock, and we're going to hear more about how the conclave is now underway at the Vatican. Still to come, how some members of the 2S LGBTQ plus Catholic community are mourning the late Pope as they say that they're concerned about the future.
When Francis became Pope, I didn't feel the fear. You would not look on me as something evil or as a mistake of God. Anybody could set it back ages.
We're going to hear more after 8 o'clock with a live interview about how some gay members of the Catholic Church are anxiously waiting and watching as the conclave has now begun to elect Pope Francis' successor. So that is coming up on World Report. We'll hear more about the conclave, and we'll have that interview with that local Manitoban coming up after 8 here on the show. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio this morning. It is Wednesday, May the 7th, and World Report is up next. Stay with us.
On Q with Tom Power.
If you know people who have had to step away from their religion, you know it's very hard. The Canadian songwriter Lights went through something like that and worried that when she stepped away, she'd lose her ability to write songs at all. She'll be here to tell you why she thinks it actually led to her best work.
You start questioning your autonomy. You want to make decisions for yourself.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Many of us know what we know about how cardinals choose the Pope from the movie Conclave. That movie is based on a book by Robert Harris, and Robert Harris is here today to talk about what he learned with rare behind-the-scenes access while writing his novel. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. This is a moment the world has been bracing for ever since the attack on India-administered Kashmir last month. Longtime rivals India and Pakistan are on a warlike footing. India conducted multiple missile strikes yesterday on Pakistan's territory, and Pakistan has authorized its Air Force to respond. In total this morning, 31 people have already been reported dead. The United Nations, China, Russia, France, and Britain are all calling for restraint. Ishan Garg has the latest from New Delhi.
Indian missiles hit 9 locations in Pakistani territory. 5 of them in Pakistan-administered Kashmir and 4 in mainland Pakistan. Indian officials say all of the targets were terrorist hideouts. And in what's being called India's biggest counter-terrorism offensive, officials say they have responded to the Pahalgam attack that killed at least 26 people 2 weeks ago. An attack India says was backed by Islamabad.
India exercised its right to respond and preempt,
as well as deter more such cross-border attacks.
That's India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri saying India ensured no civilian or military properties were hit in the strikes on Pakistani territory overnight.
Measured, non-escalatory, proportionate, and responsible. They focused on dismantling the terrorist infrastructure and disabling terrorists likely to be sent across to India.
But Pakistan is contradicting this claim, saying some civilians were killed and vowing to respond to what it calls an act of war. The situation on the two nuclear rivals' borders is already tense. Both sides are exchanging gunfire and firing projectiles. Asian and French airlines are diverting and in some cases cancelling flights to avoid the region's airspace. And despite international calls for restraint, analysts believe the situation could turn more volatile in the near future. Ishan Garg for CBC News, New Delhi.
The doors of the Sistine Chapel will lock behind 133 cardinals this morning. Their mission is to choose the next pope, following the death of Pope Francis last month. But the task at hand is more difficult during this conclave. Megan Williams has the story from the Vatican.
No phones or cell phone reception or contact with the outside world. Just ballots, prayer, and the pressure of history. This conclave is unlike any before. With 133 cardinal electors, men only, and under 80, it's the biggest in history. It's also the most geographically diverse. The late Pope Francis wanted a church from what he called the peripheries, and those he made cardinals reflect that desire. They come from distant places that never before had a vote. Brunei, South Sudan, Mongolia. Before this week, many had never even met, says Vatican observer Massimo Fagioli.
Francis was not inclined to have many consistories of cardinals. So they are largely strangers, especially those who come from the peripheries. So it's a highly unpredictable conclave.
Italy's top Vatican diplomat, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, is considered a frontrunner, with a position that gives him global visibility. So is Cardinal Luis Tagle of the Philippines. Charismatic, multilingual, and often seen as the Asian Francis. But observers warn, with cardinals divided, distant, and unfamiliar, any outcome is possible. Megan Williams, CBC News, the Vatican.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has to report back to Canada's premiers today. He promised to update them on his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. The public tone between the two leaders was friendly, but Trump signaled he would not be convinced to lift tariffs. Janice McGregor is here from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, how much is there really to update the premiers on this morning?
Marcia, when the cameras are rolling, Donald Trump always wants to look tough and in charge. So no surprise to see him unwilling to concede or walk anything back in the Oval Office yesterday. When progress happens for Canada, it's often after the fact, more quietly, on paper, and with the justification that it's good for Americans, not because a foreign government wanted it. Reporter after reporter yesterday asked the Prime Minister to identify tangible progress coming out of this meeting. But Mark Carney emphasized process.
You don't expect to have specific progress as things move along, even when you're making progress. That's why it's a global negotiation.
The victory yesterday may have been the avoidance of humiliation. Canada's delegation emerged with their sovereignty and their dignity intact. In this week of World War II anniversaries, Mark Carney reached for a Winston Churchill quote, saying, "This trip to Washington signifies the end of the beginning of this battle."
But on the domestic front, Janice, how peaceful are relations between premiers?
Premier Danielle Smith has focused her attention over the last week on a fresh round of demands for the federal government, acknowledging the frustration in her province over the election result and amplifying the minority of Albertans that want to channel that into a referendum on separation. That risks undermining the work of other premiers like Ontario's Doug Ford, who's been lobbying flat out for Team Canada.
This is a time to unite the country. Not people saying, oh, I'm leaving the country, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
I don't tell him how he should run his province, and I would hope that he doesn't tell me how I should run mine.
Since the election, Carney's been asking premiers to identify their top priorities to strengthen Canada's economy, particularly infrastructure projects, which in the energy sector can be divisive. We'll see if the Prime Minister can do that while keeping a lid on these tensions.
All right. Thank you so much, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Former U.S. President Joe Biden says he believes there is a greater threat now to democracy than at any time since the Second World War. In his first interview since leaving the White House, Biden told the BBC the Trump administration needs to stop criticizing European allies for not doing enough to support NATO.
Imagine there being no NATO. Do you think Putin would have stopped at Ukraine? Anyway, I don't understand how they fail to understand that there's strength in alliances. There's benefits. The cost there, it saves us money overall.
Biden was also asked about Donald Trump's treatment of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House back in February. Biden says the interaction was beneath America and what it stands for.
Nous allons donc accélérer nos programmes franco-allemands, développer des capacités nouvelles.
French President Emmanuel Macron announcing a new French-German defense committee as part of the country's efforts to boost defense spending. He says the council will tackle shared security threats. Speaking alongside Macron, newly elected German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Merz called on fellow EU members to invest in more support for Ukraine. This was Merz's first overseas visit since his eventful win yesterday. Later today, Macron will welcome Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara. Methane emissions around the world remain high, and Canada is one of the top 10 emitters of the greenhouse gas. But a new report by the International Energy Agency does have some good news for Canada. The CBC's Anayat Singh has more.
Strong action on methane could deliver a reduction of 0.1 degrees Celsius in the rise in global temperatures by 2050.
Doesn't sound like much, but experts say that small shift would be significant. Thomas Broderiol is an analyst with the International Energy Agency. The group released a report on global methane emissions this morning, showing that methane emissions have remained stubbornly high since 2019. Canada remains one of the top 10 worst emitters in the world, along with other major fossil fuel producers like the US, Russia, and China. Slashing emissions means plugging leaks at oil and gas production sites, the valves, pipes, tanks, and other such equipment.
There's no need for technological breakthroughs to deliver this. Around 70% of methane emissions from the energy sector can be reduced with technologies that have been deployed in.
Canada was singled out for embracing these technologies with its ambitious plan to cut methane emissions 75% by 2030. That opens up new opportunities for Canadian companies, according to Janetta McKenzie of the Canadian energy think tank, the Pembina Institute.
We're early innovators in technology and in expertise that puts us in a position to sell solutions to the world, as well as see emissions, these methane emissions come down from oil and gas.
The federal government's figures suggest Canada's methane emissions are coming down, but other major countries are falling behind, and as the report warns, missing out on a relatively easy climate solution. Anayat Singh, CBC News, Toronto.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, it is a bright, beautiful Wednesday morning here in Winnipeg. And across a lot of the province, there's going to be some beautiful weather today. Thanks for joining us to start your day on Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show at CBC on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube this morning. Well, this half hour on the program, we're going to build on what you just heard, the conclave today, as the process to choose a new pope begins. But we're going to have a look at this from a personal and local point of view. We're going to talk more about how some people might be feeling here in Winnipeg, specifically Winnipeg Catholics from the 2S LGBTQ plus community. Many of them saying they can't help but feel anxious about what the future holds. Will this pope be more conservative than the last? And what will that mean for communities around the world who started to feel welcomed in the church again? We'll have that feature conversation with one Manitoban. Stay tuned. In addition, Marjorie Dowhouse will pop in this half hour and tell us what's coming up on the noon call-in today, so we'll look forward to hearing that. Heather Wells is here to update our headlines next, though. It is 8:11 right now. Heather, what's up?
Good morning. Well, some people in Winkler are worried about the rising number of measles cases. 10 cases have been confirmed in the Southern Health region since February. Recent exposure locations include the Winkler Superstore and Boundary Trails Health Center. Southern Health says as of 2023, Southern Health had Manitoba's lowest rate of measles immunization for children at the age of 7. Tanya Nipanak's aunt continues to push for a search for her remains. Sue Caribou met yesterday with Manitoba government officials. Police believe Tanya Nipanak's body was dumped in a garbage bin nearly 14 years ago and taken to the Brady Road landfill. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, Abby, a whole bunch of people, like thousands and thousands of them, need to have good weather tonight to head out to the Jets game. And, of course, the rest of us who aren't going to the game in person would also like a nice day. What do you got?
Sunny conditions all through the day. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 3 degrees. We're warming up as we get through the day. More sunshine to come. That's going to stick around. It will be warming things up. I know we started cool, but we'll be seeing a very beautiful high of 2021 in this part of the province today, with just a bit of a cool southerly breeze coming in the evening. And as we head into tonight, the skies will stay clear. The mild breeze will continue. So if you're going to see the game, it's just going to be mild, not too cold. And across the province, we're looking at similar conditions with temperatures around 3 and 4 degrees at this point, from Winnipeg all the way down to Dauphin. But we have that smoke in that part of Dauphin into the Flin-Flon and surrounding areas. And as that southerly wind comes through, it's going to be spreading it into other regions. Up north, it's cold, but we'll see highs also around from 3 to 7 degrees rather today.
And just a reminder, speaking of the smoke, of course, wildfire season, some threats, communities already affected, Pinemutang and Peguis earlier this week. But just to mention that we also have to pay attention to the city of Winnipeg also. There's some restrictions on backyard fire pits, for example. So make sure that you check all those regulations as, man, it's beautiful, but we really actually need some rain everywhere. Let's see what's happening on the morning commute. Corey has a couple things to update us on.
Yes, all morning, for the last about hour or so, Cumberland has been closed between Edmonton and Hargrave. There are emergency vehicles on scene there blocking that section of Cumberland. So heads up there. As well, got a call from both Dennis and Amanda on the commuter line. There's a stalled van on the Osborne Bridge, on the northbound Osborne Bridge, blocking the right lane. So keep left to get around that. Amanda says it's starting to get pretty backed up. As well, got a call from Jen who says westbound Nairn, there's a fender bender in the curb lane. So keep left to get around that. That's between Kent and Chester. If you see anything else going on out there, though, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
8:15 is the time right now. And as I've been mentioning, today is the first day of the conclave to elect a successor to Pope Francis, who died in late April. As you've been hearing on World Report, an estimated 135 cardinals from all around the world are meeting in Rome. They're taking part in the process. Now, here in Winnipeg, some Catholics will be watching closely. Chris Asham is my next guest. He's 72 years old. He's gay. He's Indigenous. He's been a member of the Catholic Church his entire life, he says. He's been mourning, though, Pope Francis, who welcomed 2S LGBTQ plus people into the church. He says he has some concerns now about what the next chapter in the church might look like. And Chris joins us this morning to talk about all this. Good morning.
Good morning.
So tell me a little bit first about the welcoming part about Pope Francis. You know, what were your thoughts when he passed away, when he died?
Well, I think there was a little bit of fear, like what's going to happen to us now. And I'm two-spirited. I'm gay, but I'm Aboriginal as well. So his attitude towards the gay people, like, who am I to judge, was one of his things. If gay people came into and asking to be part of our communities, who am I to judge? And I think that's the attitude he portrayed, and I felt that I felt more comfortable in my church for the first time in a long time. So,
yeah. So you never left the church, it sounds like, but him saying that and having that attitude, as you said, made you feel differently being there.
Well, I wouldn't say that I didn't leave the church. I left for periods of time, on and off. Whenever things got a little rough, I did leave. I worked for the church as well, like I worked in the Aboriginal Catholic Church for about 5 years, and then I left. I left for about 5 years then as well. But it's always been part of my heart and part of my my feeling close to God was in the Catholic Church, and having a pope for the first time say, welcome, made me feel that I wasn't a mistake. Yeah, that God made me and created me the way I am, and I can't let people bring me down because of that. And Francis kind of supported that kind of theory, I think, and with him not being there, we could end up with somebody who is very, very conservative. The people that they're talking about right now that could be in the running for this, there's a couple of them that are very conservative. The gentleman from Holland, I think it was, in the Netherlands, or in that area anyway, is a very conservative cardinal, and I think he would, if we got somebody like him, we'd step back a few years.
It's quite a statement for you to make, a personal statement for you to share, Chris, just about how deeply you feel, the power of a pope, if you will, in terms of its effect and its impact on people. That you were saying, that Pope Francis's attitude directly draws a line to you feeling, here in Manitoba, being here, that, as you put it, you weren't a mistake. Yeah. How you talked about why you're concerned, about the choice moving forward. What do you hope that that is thought about, or maybe I should ask, do you feel there's an understanding of how important it is for the church to continue to move forward, to not only recognize Catholics like yourself, who happen to be two-spirited, as you said, but to also be part of the progress in the world? How important is it that the church, considers that as they choose their next leader?
Well, I think it's important that Francis's work continues. That he was a pope that mixed with the poor, mixed with the unwanted. He was truly a Peter, if you will, in the sense that he was there for the people. And it's important that continues. He has a huge role in the world, if we have a pope that is that looks on people, looks on only the wealthy or the important people in the church, the priests or the nuns or the bishops and cardinals as the most important people, I think we're going to lose out. I think we really are, and because the church is the people, and it's made up of all those people that I mentioned. But they are. They should be. We should all be in there together and working together for a better world.
I understand that part of what has kept you with your faith in the times where you weren't, feeling welcomed at church, and in the Catholic faith was being part of a group called Dignity. Is that right? So can you tell me about them and how they helped you, build community with gay Catholics?
Dignity was a group of gay men and women who felt not welcomed in their church, but still wanted to be Catholic, and so we met. Every week, I think it was that we met for, and it was the only place where we can go to pray as a community and still consider ourselves Roman Catholic, and because we weren't made to feel welcome in our own little churches that we belonged to.
How hard is that when you're, I mean, it's maybe a silly question.
How hard is that?
Yeah, to belong. It's not just that you're not being, I mean, you're not being welcomed, but you're not being welcomed to something that is so fundamental. I mean, faith is fundamental to people in how they build their identity, in their lowest moments, highest moments. It's a fabric of who you are. So I can't imagine what that was like for you.
Well, it was very, very painful. It hurt in the deepest core of my being, you know.
Yeah.
So it was something that I had to live with from a very, very early age, you know, and had to hide or had to lie about who I was. I had to lie about my partner. You know, now in the church that I belong to, and I think that's basically due to Francis and his attitude, but it reflects on the people down the line of how it is. You know, like my partner and I go to an indigenous Catholic church, and the people there know we are partners, and they welcome us. You know, as a matter of fact, we're both on the parish council. You know, so it's a different way of doing things. So,
what are you? You talked about being, you know, concerned. You're going to watch the conclave closely, as are Catholics around the world. But what's at stake if the next pope is more conservative? What will that mean for you?
Well, we could always just not ignore what's happening, but he's the head of our church, you know. This person is the head of our church, and if this person says that we don't welcome gays, we don't want gays in our church, I don't think that anyone would ever say that, but you know, he might imply that, right? So, I don't know. I'm 72 years old. I'm not sure I can step back from this, you know, and start living those lies and those, because I need my church. I need to be able to go to it, and I need to feel welcome there and loved, you know. And if we got a pope that said that gays weren't welcome, or there wasn't anything bad that happened to the Aboriginal people or Indigenous people, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I didn't ask you about that aspect because I know you've shared with us that your husband was also a residential school survivor and is in ministry with you at your church. What was it like to hear the Pope apologize for what happened in residential schools then, Pope Francis?
Oh, it was like,
Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what, sir? Your emotion right now, I think, is your answer.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. It really is. All the best to you as you watch this conclave with the world. Thank you so much for being so personal about your faith and about what this means to you, the selection of the next leader.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That is Winnipegger Chris Asham, a member of the Catholic Church, in talking to us this morning about the selection of the next pope. As you've been hearing on World Report, the conclave, the cardinals have gathered, and our coverage on CBC will continue through the day, of course, and we'll be watching for that puff of white smoke, all of us, all the world. You can also follow what's happening on cbc.ca nationally. And if you want to weigh in on the conversation that I've had with Mr. Asham, or if you want to add to the conversation if you're watching and what's at stake for you, as a Catholic, please do. You can call our listener line at 204-788-3205.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
It is 8:26 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and on YouTube. As I mentioned, Marjorie Dalhouse will be here to tell us before the 8:30 news what's coming up on the call-in on Radio Noon today. If you want to call in and make a date with that show. Between 12:30 and 1 every day, they have an idea that they put forward, a question, they have a guest, they walk us through a topic of conversation, and you can also always pitch what kind of a call-in conversation you might want to hear. So remember that as well. First, we have a little bit of music, though. We have Winnipeg band Sean Burns and Lost Country this morning to play for you. They're one of the top names in honky-tonk music these days. Here's their song called Someday Soon.
There's a young man that I know, just turned 21. Comes from down in southern Colorado, just out of the service, is looking for his farm someday soon. Gone with him someday soon. My parents cannot stand him, 'cause he rides the rodeo. They say he's not your kind, he'll leave you crying. But I would follow him right down the roughest road to hoe someday soon. Going with him someday soon. When it comes to call, my pa ain't got a good word to say. Yes, it's 'cause it's just as wild in its younger days. Blow your blue northern will always love to me. He's riding in tonight from California, loves his down old rodeo as much as he loves me. Someday soon, going with him someday soon.
Listening to some music this morning from Sean Burns and Lost Country called Someday Soon, if you want to add it to your playlist. Corey's been working on his summer playlist right now. You know, if you're driving or hanging out, what sounds like sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
This could be a good driving tune, Marge.
I think so.
Chilling out.
Cruising?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marjorie Dalhouse is who you're listening to, host of Radio Noon, and of course here to tell us what's coming up on the call-in.
Well, we're talking about bugs. Everything, all things bugs. I know we may not think about it, but a lot of them are emerging now. We've got some bees coming out. A lot of people thinking about how do I attract these pollinators to my garden? Well, we've also got some tips too. You can deal with wasps right now. I know we think of them as late summer pests, but there's something we can do now, and of course something we can do too to get ahead of mosquitoes. But we're taking all your questions, bugs. Good bugs, bad bugs,
all bugs.
Identify bugs. Call us today on Radio Noon after 12:30.
All right, thanks, Marge.
Thanks, Marcy.
It's a good summer convo. I like it. If you want to leave a message about bugs, 788-3797. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, Winnipeg starting to warm up just in time for the whiteout later today. Sunny with a high of 21. Health officials are working to stem a rising tide of measles cases in southern Manitoba. The province is warning of potential exposures at the Superstore in Winkler, as well as Boundary Trails Health Centre just outside of Winkler, in between Winkler and Morden. Dr. Devinder Singh is the medical director of health for that region. He says the relatively low vaccination rate in the area is concerning.
Those are the exact type of conditions for measles to spread and to spread quickly, because it is very contagious.
As of 2023, Southern Health had the lowest measles immunization rate for 7-year-olds in Manitoba at about 53%. The aunt of a woman whose remains are believed to be in a Winnipeg landfill is hopeful after a meeting with the province. Sue Caribou wants Brady Road landfill to be searched for her niece, Tanya Nepanak. She was last seen in the city nearly 14 years ago. Police believe her body was put in a garbage bin. The province is planning to look for the remains of Ashley Shingoose in that same landfill. Caribou met with government officials yesterday and wants to make sure a search for Nepanak is included in those efforts.
I'm Tanya's voice. My family that were murdered, I'm their voice, and I want to do things in a good way for my family.
Police searched a small portion of Brady Road landfill for Tanya Nepanak in 2012. They did not find her remains and called the search off after a week. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to brief Canada's premiers today on his first meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. The two leaders spent a couple of hours together at the White House yesterday. It was their first face-to-face discussion about U.S.-Canada relations and Trump's ongoing trade war since Carney was sworn in as Prime Minister. Carney says the leaders are now fully engaged, but adds there is more work to be done. A patient is suing a Winnipeg chiropractor, claiming he injured her during treatment and she suffered a stroke as a result. The lawsuit says the patient was taken from Maples Chiropractic and admitted to the Health Sciences Centre. It happened in 2023. The patient filed the lawsuit last week. The court document alleges the chiropractor failed to warn the patient about risks associated with the treatment and specifically failed to warn her a stroke could occur. The allegations have not been tested in court, and the chiropractor has not filed a statement of defense. Another prairie icon on the rural Manitoba landscape has been lost. Fire tore through a wooden grain elevator in Waskata yesterday. It is yet another elevator lost to either fire, demolition, or disrepair. At its peak, Manitoba had more than 700 wooden elevators, but Gordon Goldsborough at the Manitoba Historical Society says that number keeps getting smaller.
The Manitoba Historical Society maintains what we call the grain elevator countdown. Countdown assuming that eventually we're going to get down to a very small number. And it presently stands at 115.
Around 60 of the remaining elevators are still in use. No one was hurt in yesterday's fire. Well, don't be alarmed if you hear an alarm suddenly this afternoon. The province is testing the National Public Alerting System today. At 1:55 this afternoon, an emergency alert message will go out on TV, radio, and compatible wireless devices. If you don't get the alert test, there could be another number of reasons. The province says those range from bad network connections to poor cell coverage or your device software and settings. Winnipeg Jets coach Scott Arniel says the thrill of Sunday's double overtime win is behind them. Arniel says the team is now focused on Game 1 of the Round 2 series against the Dallas Stars, which begins tonight. He says different players have stepped up to get the Jets to this point, including goalie Connor Hellebuck.
It's about our team staying together, pulling each other along and pulling each other through the hard times. And that's kind of what everybody did for Helly. And now, you know what, we're expecting him to continue to play his part.
Arniel says center Mark Scheifele and defensemen Josh Morrissey and Logan Stanley will be game time decisions. It is a late start tonight. The game time begins at 8:30 at Canada Life Centre. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, 12 hours from now. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells in our news department. I want to thank Heather as well as Megan Ketcherson and Joni Nicolo in our news department for their contributions today. Also, associate producers who worked on today's show, Chidi Ekuma Zuma worked on a lot of the different items on today's show, and Jenna Badosso as well. Our community reporter Shanley Vidal had an item on today. Producer in current affairs of shows overall is Nellie Gonzalez, and the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba is Leif Larson. And big thanks to our live crew, Abby Adiemi, Brad Lillies, and Corey Funk, who's here with Last Look at Traffic.
Cumberland between Hargrave and Edmonton has been closed for the last hour and a bit. Emergency vehicles are on scene. As well, a stalled car blocking the curb lane on northbound Osborne Bridge. Keep left to get around that. And westbound Nairn around Keenly side, fender bender is blocking the curb lane. Keep left to get around that.
Abby?
It was a cool start, but we're warming up. We're going to see highs get to 21 and 22 in most of the regions, but the smoke is a concern in the south central region into the northern parts of the province today.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. That's what we're here for on CBC. And I also just want to thank the guests. I mean, my goodness, some incredible conversations this morning, including the one we had this half hour with Chris Asham. So big thanks to everyone who joins us every morning on the program and offers their perspective on what is happening in the world and their insight on what is happening in Manitoba for all of us where we live. So thank you, everyone. Take care, be well, and we'll be back again tomorrow with another edition of your morning show here on CBC. This has been Information Radio. The Currents coming up next on 89.3 FM. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the sun.